celebrating 16 years of excellence for you.
As part of a small line of pieces we're doing that are kind of pin-up-y type shots where they're a little bit rougher and simpler with just a portrait of a figure, no background, I want to do something to complement the piece I did earlier with Wonder Woman. And Starfire is another favorite of mine from DC, and in particular the way she was designed by George Perez, the way she appeared for, I want to say, the first 20 years of her existence before she was changed by a cartoon version that kind of took away a lot of the alluring qualities to her that were in her initial DNA. So there's a very distinctive face, hairstyle, and vibe from her when she was first created in 1980, and I wanted to connect with that.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Wow, it seems like we were just talking. We were just talking 2 hours ago. It's Word Balloon, the Comic Book Conversation Show. John Suntress here. I'm happy to welcome Joshua Williamson back to Word Balloon. It's good to see you, Josh.
Good to see you too, man. Always.
Absolutely, man. We got Tina Howard and I were just talking, and your name came up, and also we were lamenting that, of course, the last con was about 15 months ago, C2E2, and you were there as well, and thankfully, It seems like we're crawling out of the darkness and back into the light.
Yeah, I think we're getting close. I mean, I'm starting to get offers for cons and stuff, and I'm starting to talk to people about, when we're going to start going back. I feel like I'll probably do something local. It's crazy because you get these offers, and there's a part of me that is just like, man, I would love to just dive right back in and start just going to a ton of conventions if I could. But you got to kind of weigh it out. I still got to check some stuff, but
sure.
I think I'll probably do something local, and then I'll do New York. I feel like I'll do New York and then start talking about doing stuff. But next year will be a whole other story. I think with some of the stuff that's coming out next year and promoting things, I'll be hitting the cons much harder next year in 2022, which I think we'll all will. I think all of us are so itchy to get back to this. I definitely miss it, dude. I was thinking about this not just from a standpoint of being able to talk to other pros and getting able to hang out with people, but also getting a chance to meet the readers and engage with them and talk to them about this stuff. It's the best way. To me, it's the best feedback. It's the best way of getting an actual ground view.
Sure.
Of what's going on, what's working, what isn't. Getting to talk to the people, and you get to see and then what they're bringing to you. They want you to sign. That is always a really interesting sign of what's working and what isn't working. What people were bringing to you. But it was this last Saturday. 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, James Tinian and I went to Epcot. So we were at MegaCon. And so the first day we were like, okay, let's go to whose haircut am I clapping? That's funny.
Mine, but no, you've got a much more. I trimmed my beard.
Yeah.
And also, yours is still nice wood, kind of dark brown. And I got, I keep saying I got Kenny Rogers or Hemingway's beard happening.
There's definitely white in here.
Well, I don't see it.
Yeah, so 2 years ago, James and I, we were at MegaCon, and we went to Epcot Center, and it was a lot of fun. We spent the whole day just talking about comic books and ideas we had and things we wanted to do and create our own stuff. So we wanted to do at DC, and we were going on, just going around the world at Epcot and drinking and eating and stuff. And it was I was talking to James because that was 2 years ago, right now that we did that.
Yeah.
And I miss that. I need that. Sometimes James and I will get deep into conversations about our careers and stuff, or just stuff we're planning, or then you start talking about ideas. And it's for a long time, James Scott and I would meet up every few months, either at Scott's house or at a convention, and we would talk about a lot of these ideas. And it's all three of us are man, we miss that, be able to sit down and just brainstorm stuff. So It'll be nice. It'll be nice. I mean, it's funny to me how often now I'll end a conversation with another creator just being like, listen, soon we'll be able to get a drink together and we can talk about all kinds of stuff. So we're getting there. I think we'll be able to get back into that soon.
No, absolutely. God, dude, I can't, and I'm sure you feel the same way. Thank God for technology, because I can't imagine having to have gone through this, back in the 80s. I can think of, the pre internet world of, fax machines and being our phone bills, I'm sure, would be through the roof. And just at least, I mean, because at least even on this video level, it's not the same. And I agree with you, man. I can't wait to see people live again. In fact, I've already said I'm going to be at Terrificon in August, so that'll be my first show back. I'm not sure about New York. I haven't decided yet. But then, of course, the next C2E2 is December, and that's in my backyard, so that's an easy one for me to go to still. So
I've been bouncing around all of them. I got an email yesterday about a couple different cons, and so I'm looking at this stuff. But yeah, dude, like the amount of like Zoom and Teams calls I do now. Well, what's interesting though, I will say about this whole year is that like I almost feel as though that level of communication we would only do it at conventions or in person. And this whole year made it so it's like it almost made me talk to some creators way more than I was talking to them before because of that, right? Like, there's artists I talk to more often in email or via Zoom. There's like a couple different artists I talk to fairly regularly on Zoom now, just to kind of like, bullshit, but also talk about the books we're working on. And there's a bunch of other writers too, it's like Ron B is somebody I talk to probably about once a week on Zoom. And it's just to catch up with each other and also bounce ideas around. But it's like,
sure,
like that's somebody I would see like once a year, maybe. But now I talk to him much more often. Some of it's because we're working on, we're both working on so much DC stuff. But still, dude, it's like, I don't know how we could have done this without it. It's like talking editorial. I mean, I wonder how this is going to be how it is from now on, too. It's like, even if people start going back to offices and stuff, is it going to be just like we're still going to keep doing these like Zoom calls and stuff with our editors and with other talent, It'll be really interesting. Yeah.
I agree. Let's get this out of the way. And I'm sure you won't have a clear answer, but given all the activity that's been going on up top with AT&T now merging with Discovery and taking all their media assets and merging them with Discovery, it's a very interesting time. I think again, I have no idea what that means specifically for the publishing end of DC. I know what it means for the TV and film divisions and stuff, but I mean, I'm sure all this stuff is still being hashed out. But any thoughts? Any word?
Oh, it was Monday morning, right? Or was it Monday morning? It was like Sunday night.
Yeah, I think you're right. It probably was Sunday night.
It was like, I mean, it's still so raw and new, and I definitely had some conversations with them, and but it's really too early, I think, to really talk about it. I mean, what does this even go in effect for like a year or whatever? So it's like, yeah, right. But for me, it's weird, man. I mean, some of this stuff, and maybe I'm wrong with this, and people can correct me if they want, but it's like there's been a lot of changes at DC. I got my first job at DC Comics back in 2009, right? Like that was my first DC job.
Hilarious.
So I'm like, dude, that company's been through a lot of changes since 2009. There's been a lot of stuff, a lot of people come and go. And at the end of the day, my job is to write comic books and try to, get those books out and get them to sell. Like that is essentially like my goal, my job. And that's never really changed on my level. But I do recognize there's a lot of other people much higher than me or the people I know, and they have a whole other level of stress and a whole other things that's going on.
Oh, God, yeah.
But for me, it's always weird. Like, I don't know, man. It's weird. Like, I always empathize with them, and I try to make it so that I'm not the difficult person that day. I try to.
Sure.
But with that stuff, when it comes to whether it was AT&T or whether it was, now with Discovery, like, I'm not really in those conversations. And at the end of the day, like, my job doesn't change. Right.
Understood.
So, like, we'll see what happens, though. You never know. You never know. It might come up with stuff. I've definitely been in enough meetings where it's like, I don't know. There's always like little stuff, like even when AT&T came in and everything, and the stuff we've been doing the last couple of years, and with obviously some of the changes at DC just this last year.
Right.
But at the end of the day, man, it's like, I don't know. My job is still the same. Like, I'm still writing comics. I turn my script in. I work with editorial. Work with Marie and
yes.
Just been there, you know. I mean, for me, this year's been changed because it's like my role at DC has obviously changed a lot in the last year, and it's like, you know, working on my books, working on Infinite Frontier. There's a lot of books that I will pitch to DC that I'm not even writing. That it's just stuff that like, here's ideas I have here. I'm looking at the big picture, all this stuff, and so like my role's changed in those ways. So
Yes.
I don't know what discovery stuff. Like we'll totally see how it goes down. I mean, my hope is my job does not change. Like I'm hoping.
I hear you.
Just turn my scripts in and get it going. But dude, I don't know, man. I mean, yeah, who knows, dude? Who knows?
Right. Well, and that the only thing I would say is that given that it's the merge with Discovery, it's content merging with content, and then I think, I mean, the concern I had with AT&T really controlling the shots was they just seem to be divesting all these publishing arms of Time Warner. And you know, and I understood that's, you know, again, media companies are media companies. At least it seems that with Discovery, there's likely a publishing component with all the shows they represent. And maybe I'm wrong, but it would seem to me that, you know, if you're doing a cooking show for Discovery, you're probably publishing cooking books with them. Maybe not. Maybe, you know, maybe that's an independent sale. I have no idea.
You know, I think their priorities are different. You know, it's like their priorities obviously are much more of entertainment, and there's a hint of I refrain from using this, but a lifestyle, right? Like there's definitely a bit more of that of like entertainment, getting lifestyle stuff, getting stuff engaging directly with the consumer. Like obviously there's much more of a change in priority. And if you look at the stuff that Discovery has, you can see they don't have this part, right? They don't have the kind of basically Warner Media. They don't have that part.
Right. So, they don't have the drama side.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting the drama side.
Well, you know,
yeah,
like homicide, drama side. That's it. There you go.
Yeah, they don't have that part, you know. So I think it makes sense to me. Like when I saw it, I was like, okay, that makes sense. I mean, I'll say this when a lot of stuff's gone on over the years, right? Like I remember stuff was going on when the AT&T merger happened, and I would see people talk about it online, and I said the same thing. That I'm like, anybody that says absolutes right now, if they know what's going on, don't believe me. Know what's going on.
Right.
And this last year, a lot of stuff was happening. I would hear all kinds of stuff. And there were things that surprised me, obviously, that happened in this last year. But I would hear stuff like, this is going on, this is going on, this is going on. And I'm like, man, I'm in the building. That stuff's not going on. You know, it's like, I'm definitely like working on things. I mean, dude, I mean, how many times, I mean, I don't know. It's funny, man. You've been doing this for a while too. It's like, I remember working at a comic book store in high school. And I remember coming to work one day, and the owner and the manager were like freaking out. And I was like, what's going on? And they were just like, Marvel filed for bankruptcy. And they were the sky has fallen. It's over. They were like, it is done. This is it. And I remember being like, I was just a kid in high school. I only worked there 2 days a week. But I was like, oh my God, does that mean I'm out of a job? Because I was just like, oh, you closing? Like, what's happening? Like, is it that bad? You know, and I didn't know it was that bad, right? But it was like, man, the sky was super, super falling.
Oh yeah.
And definitely Marvel went through a lot of changes, but man, look at how awesome Marvel was like within a few years of that. Because they had Joe Quesada come in, and then he just starts kicking ass all over the place. You know, Brian like Bendis came in like not that long after that, dude. It's like 3 years after that.
Not even.
Dude, we're talking, what is that, 24 years ago?
Yep. Yeah.
So look at
very late, like 98, 97.
You know?
Yeah.
And so it's always funny to me, like my entire time I've ever, you know, I got my first job working at a comic book store in 1995. And so ever since then, I've heard I've heard a lot of stuff. There's always been one consistent one, right? And you know what it is. It's everybody's closing down. It's over. It's
end of comics.
End of comics.
End of comics. Yep.
And it's so weird, man. It's so strange to be like, you know, this kid reading comics, to hearing that, work at a comic book store, hearing that, and then everything I've done since then to now I'm working and I'm like an architect of all this stuff we're doing, and I'm still hearing it, and I'm like, all right, well, any day now, right?
No, I totally agree with you. It's never going to be the end, because this stuff is still making money and too valuable, and that has been the nicest story out of COVID, is the fact that the comic industry, that, you know, we still want to read the books, man, and we're all buying the books, and that's great.
I'm sure you heard, man. I mean, you know, people were buying a lot of books. I mean, you could tell, like, obviously the success people have had in certain areas. but just the book market, everything like that stuff. People were really buying a lot of books. Thank you, person who said I have a good shelf.
Yeah, they.
It actually goes all the way around. It actually goes all the way around. Like
I
this
believe
is, this is mostly DC, and I have like Absolutes behind me, like Image and Marvel are over here.
Okay.
A bunch of different independent stuff over here, and then there's like a ton of Batman black and white statues over here. I got a Captain America shield in here, an Iron Man helmet.
That's great.
This shelf right here, you can't see it. It's five shelves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shelves tall. It's just Batman trades. And there's all kinds of on the sides, dude. I got so much stuff here. The thing is this, I have to be careful when I do these videos sometimes because normally I have 3 whiteboards in my office. One that is like for long-term projects. And then there's one down here that's more for like, I put it up, sometimes it'll be right behind me.
Sure.
And that one has stuff that's mapping out like more like that issue that week I'm working on. So I have this whiteboard. There's one whiteboard that's here. It's on the other side. And that whiteboard has the entire Infinite Frontier plan, but it also has a bunch of stuff for DC over the next like 18 months to 2 years. And that's one of those ones where if I ever accidentally left it up, oh man, that would be an accident. It would be really funny. Somebody could easily, and it's interesting. Like I think sometimes there's people in comics who need to kind of recognize that like our audience is so smart. Like the comic creators are so smart that if you tease them with like the tiniest thing, they will 100% figure it out every time. Like you could tease the littlest thing and there is somebody out there that will map the whole thing. They'll sit there and they'll draw it on a board, they'll figure it out, they'll cross it all, so I have to be really careful with what I show.
I get it, man.
With Flash War, when I was working on Flash War, I took a picture of my reference stack for Flash War, and it was all these different Flash books, like Crisis on Infinite Earths in there. It was all these different things, right? And somebody literally was like, you know what's not in that stack, but this other book is in this stack? They were like, of all the books that he has, he doesn't have Blitz. And because he doesn't have Blitz, that makes me think that Hunter Zolomon is going to be the villain of Flash War. And they were right. They were totally right. I, on purpose, left Blitz out because I didn't want them to figure it out, right? I was like, if Blitz is in there, they're going to know. Like, they're going to immediately be like, Hunter Zolomon is the villain. And, but the fact that it wasn't there is how they figured it out, which is just crazy.
That's awesome, man. Well, and again, as Chandason says, do you remember how everyone overanalyzed the chart behind the deal for 5G? Yeah, and again, we talked about this the last time we talked too, Josh. What has happened with what started with 5G and is now morphed into both Future State and Infinite Frontier. I'm really glad because I won't deny, as a DC fan, when I first heard about 5G, I'm like, is this a good idea? I don't know. I'm a little nervous or whatever. I'm like, God, I really, okay. I'll certainly check it out. But I've really been pleasantly surprised.
You know this, right? Like I wasn't working on it. We talked about this before. Yes. Like I wasn't working on 5G. I was leaving. I mean, that's the truth. Like I was leaving. Like I had kind of was looking at the writing on the wall and where things were going and I didn't feel like it was for me, and the books I was talking about, I just, every time I wasn't interested or things weren't clicking. And so my plan was to leave after Flash. Like that was really the goal, was to wrap up Flash, do what I could on Death Metal, working with Scott and James, wrap up the story that we were planning on telling. And then I was, getting out of town. And I didn't really tell anybody that. I didn't really tell anybody at the time, but my contract was winding up and I knew what I was doing. And but then things changed, right? Things changed. I renewed my deal, and then I was like, all right, let's go. And then I started talking to them about different books. We started talking about Robin. We started talking about all kinds of stuff last summer. And then that led to talking about Infinite Frontier and all the plans we had. And then it was like, oh, it's on now. It's game time. So I was like, here's a bunch of ideas. Here's a bunch of stuff we can do. And started pushing it. But yeah, like 5G, man. I mean, man, talk about getting a drink at a con.
Oh, good Lord. Yeah, no kidding.
But I don't mean that in disrespect to people that were working on that stuff. There was definitely really talented people putting some stuff together. But for me, it wasn't for me. Like I definitely felt like I was ready to go with Flash. Like I was ready to hit the road. But, here we are. And And I think a lot of stuff we're doing, man, there's a lot of really awesome books coming. I'm always hearing about new stuff. Like I was having meetings today with a couple of the editors, and we were just talking about stuff that, again, things I'm not working on. And the next couple of weeks, I'll start jamming out with a couple other writers that are in DC and talking about their books with them and talking about what what they're working on, what I'm working on, throwing ideas around. I mean, it's been an awesome time. But yeah, dude, there's so much cool stuff coming, and I think it's part of because everyone is just really enthusiastic and energized with what we're doing right now.
Well, all right. Nathan has a great opening question.
Yeah, fire away.
All right. I hear my echo. I apologize if I'm echoing.
Let's hear it.
Will you be helping with Fear State, or will Robin be separate from the event? And tell me what you can about. Let's start with Fear State.
Okay, so I'm not working on Fear State, but I'm in the meetings for Fear State. We have about a once a month group call with all the Bat Writers, and we talk about what is going on in the books currently. We talk about what is coming with Fear State, and we talk about what is happening beyond. Obviously, like I said, you and I talked before. Like I talk to James every day. I know his plans on the book for a long time. Like I could spoil the whole beats of everything if I wanted to. I will not. But it's like I know it all. He knows all my plans. Like I share it with him every day. He actually just read right before we jumped on. He read Infinite Frontier #1, and I was like talking with him about it. And it's like, but with that event, so I'm in those conversations. I definitely talk with James, and I've been in those meetings, and I pitched some ideas about different stuff with those books. But I'm not directly working on it. Robin is not crossing over with it.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that I wanted to keep Robin out of Gotham for a little bit. So Robin will be out of Gotham for the first 8 issues. And then it'll start matching up more with what's going on with Batman. But that'll be kind of the aftermath of Fear State, like the things that are going on after. Robin will kind of come back in. Damian will come back into Gotham in the aftermath. And that'll definitely play a part of that part. But yeah, I'm not crossing over with Fear State at all. But again, like I talk to James about it every day. And I know what's going on with it, which is good, though. I think it's good that we all kind of know what each other are doing, because then we can
100%. Yes.
Well, it's like, I mean, this will probably get shown soon, but it's like they're definitely going to be, when I put this, there'll be some guests in Robin in August in issue 5 that will kind of tie into more of what's going on with Gotham, and you'll kind of see those pieces and everything.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
All right. Again, coming out of the Robin War and everything that happened there, and now Damian is trying to embrace his grandfather's legacy and really be
stuff. Oh yeah. Okay. So what's going to happen in the book is the first 3 issues. So the first 8 issues is essentially all about the tournament, right? It's all about Damian gets thrown into like a Mortal Kombat style tournament. That's the whole first 8 issues. The actual tournament didn't start until issue 6.
Okay.
Like there's a bunch of stuff that kind of leads into it. But the first 3 issues are really all about kind of the lead into the tournament. Something happens in the book, and then Damian is with Ra's al Ghul for issue 4 and hanging out with Grandpa and learning from Grandpa for an issue. And then issue 5, I'll just say it. I mean, he's with Nightwing. So it's like he's with Nightwing and other Robin characters, other former Robin in issue 5. And so it's really about like 4 and 5, in a lot of ways to me, are about like training. Like he's retraining with, one with Ra's, then with the Robins, and then he goes back to the tournament. And then we start the in-tournament arc, which is 6, 7, and 8. And then it's just all fighting nonstop. I mean, it gets pretty bonkers. There's going to be an 8-page fight scene in issue 7 that is just him and one person just going at it for 8 pages. It might be longer. I was talking to Gleb about it. I haven't read. That's like I'm right at the cusp of writing that. I've already done page breaks and everything. So right now it's 8 pages of just them going back and forth. It's like the big fight. It's one of the bigger ones. So I wanted to make sure I had the room to do that. But it gets nuts, dude. The book is going to tie in a bunch of other stuff. There's another book I'm working on that connects to it. It's going to be interesting, like when you see that what's going on with Robin is then going to connect with another book I'm working on that hasn't been announced yet, and those books will collide. And the aftermath of that will collide with something else. So it's like all this stuff, even the Infinite Frontier stuff. Like Infinite Frontier is, the 6-issue mini, but really it's just chapter 1. Right, it's act 1 of something else that we're doing, and it'll be like Infinite Frontiers Act 1, the aftermath will be Act 2, and then there's another really big thing I'm doing next year, and that will be Act 3, and that'll be the culmination of all this stuff from Infinite Frontier and all this stuff I've been working on forever. Like it'll all come together in one big one big crazy thing. Like it'll be interesting when you see how it all comes together into this nutty story we're planning for next year. For it'll be easily, I think, the biggest and most intimidating thing I've ever written. Like I'm super nervous. I'm starting to write it in July. I'm writing it that early, even though it won't come out for a while. But I'm anxious to write it. I've already plotted a lot of it out, and that's part of what talking with other creators about and talking to editorial about a lot. And it's going to be huge. But yeah, like Infinite Frontier, Robin, a few other things, other books other people are working on, they're all going to collide at some point, and that'll be part of the stuff I'm doing next year, the really big thing I'm doing next year. But Infinite Frontier and will be that's like act one of this really big thing that we're planning.
Okay, I want to get back to Infinite Frontier, but while we're talking about Robin, Chase points out that you just spoiled that Damien isn't dead. He had his heart ripped out. Well, yeah, but I kind of knew
that
he was going to walk away from.
Trying really badly, like, to not show anything. Read the book, you'll see what happens. But also, I feel like there's some obvious stuff going on, like. And also, you can see the covers. It's out there.
Right. No. And yeah, man, come on. He's hanging with Grandpa. Lazarus pits are around, I'm sure.
Lazarus Island.
There you go. Exactly, man. Come on.
Trying to piece some of the stuff together about what's going on.
How old is Damien?
It's hard. He's 14.
No. He's 14 now?
Yeah, he's 14.
Okay.
Yeah, I try not to spoil stuff, man. It's so tough, dude. It's so tough. Like, I remember working on Flash, and at one point, and Flash was double shipped too. It made it even harder not to spoil something. And I was like, okay, here's what I want to do. I'm going to do a Gorilla Grodd story, but I want it to be a surprise that Gorilla Grodd is the villain, that he was responsible for the Speed Force storm. So no covers, no solicits. Keep off the covers, solicits, everything. And they were right. They were like, if you think you're going to keep Gorilla Grodd off of 6 covers and he's the main villain, you're out of your mind. Like, it's impossible. You got to put him on the cover. He's part of the selling point. And I learned some stuff from that of like, okay, well, I'll put him on the cover, but we're not going to say why he's there, right? Like, he was responsible for the Speed Force storm, that he was dying. Like, we had this whole plan. But sometimes you can make it work, It's like we were able to keep it secret for the most part that Hunter Zolman was the villain of Flash War by having the annual come out so much in advance that able to kind of create this drumbeat without spoiling things too much. But yeah, keeping spoilers it's tough, dude. It's so tough. And then we're sending out, we send out preview PDFs and stuff. You'll read those, and you're just like, oh man, please. But with Robin, like both Gleb and I were talking about, we couldn't believe that the ending was never spoiled. I was really glad it wasn't spoiled. So I'm glad we got that initial reaction at the end of issue 1, him getting his heart ripped out by Flatline. That was and we didn't get it spoiled. But I've had this before, dude. Like, all my solicits are usually pretty misleading on purpose. Like, I work with editorial. Sometimes I write them or I give notes on them, and I'm like, take this part out, put this part in, because I recognize now that the solicits are part of the experience, right? Like, there are a lot of readers who read the solicits and they read the books, and it's all part of like their experience for that book or for DC Comics as a whole. And so I'm like, all right, so if that's part of it, if that's part of their experience as solicits, then you have to use the solicits to tease them. You can't just give away the information, and that sometimes means being misleading a little. Just a little.
Understood. No. Okay, let's see. And again, sorry, guys, if I'm repeating here. I'm going to work on my audio. Maybe that'll help if I do that. All right, let's see. Jonathan Chow is very excited that Connor Hawke is coming back, and wants to know if beyond Robin there are plans. It sounds like there might be for Connor Hawke. Obviously, you're not just doing it for a stunt.
No, it was important to me to bring Connor back. I had asked about it so many times. This is how it always is. I'm always the person in the room raising my hand, being like, "Can I bring this character back? Can I bring this character back? This character's missing. I would like to bring them back." And I feel like, there were some characters that got kind of a raw deal when New 52 started, and I think that obviously Green Arrow's family like completely disappeared. They're all gone, or they're on weird locations. Weird stuff was going on with them.
Yep.
And when we got into Rebirth, it was like this gradual, okay, let's start getting some of this stuff back. And so it's like with him, I couldn't believe that Connor had been gone for so long, and he was a character that I loved. Like I was reading that book, and yeah, I couldn't believe they just like erased that guy. So
Yeah.
it was important to me to bring him back. I thought he was a cool character, and so when I got this opportunity to work on Robin, and we started talking about doing it as like a Mortal Kombat style tournament, I was like, all right, perfect, Connor.
Right.
Connor's, one of the best hand-to-hand fighters in the DCU. He was in that tournament story that was like the crossover back in the day. So I'm like, let's do that. Let's get this guy back. And it was interesting talking with the editorial because I think some parts of the editorial they didn't really know who he was, because he hadn't been in the books for 10 years. So
Sure.
You're not like a hardcore DC nerd like I am. But thankfully, there were a lot of people in editorial who were like, I love that character. Hell yeah, let's do that. Let's get this going. And so we got him in there, and yeah, there's more plans beyond this. But I love writing him. So I there's a scene in issue 3 with him and Damian. They started talking about their dads and how much their dads have in common, and it's one of my favorite scenes in the book. So he'll definitely be in other stuff after Robin, but he plays a major part in Robin too, though. I mean, I feel like he's definitely a supporting character in the book, and I think he'll be an important part. I mean, it's like I didn't realize until how much I've said this before. Like I didn't realize how much him and Demi had in common until I got to write them, and then I realized how they're different, how different they are, but how much they have in common. And I think they both kind of go on like an emotional journey together across the first 8 issues.
I understand. Eduardo wants to know if there are plans for Roy and Cheshire's relationship with Leanne now that she is back. And yeah, I always thought that was kind of what a gut wrenching. I mean, again, you want your characters to go through hell because that it's persevering after tragedies that make them strong and stuff. But yeah, I mean, and again, Roy, another character that really got a raw deal just in general. And I'm glad what you guys did with Death Metal brought him back and everything. So
Titans are always getting hit, or they were always getting hit so hard, and I was a big Sidekick fan when I was a kid. Like I always liked all the sidekicks. Sure. And I love the main heroes, but when you're a kid, you're like the sidekicks because they're kids and you can relate to them, and they're your access point to these characters, or your entry point to these characters. And the Titans characters, I was, I don't know, as a kid, I've always liked them. And yeah, they definitely get kind of bumped around more than most. I think those days are over. There's definitely going to be some drama still. It's not going to be easy riding all the time because that would be boring. No. But with Roy, yeah, I mean, once we started working on Death Metal and we started talking about Batman having the ring, it was like, oh, we'll get Roy through this. We'll get Roy back through this. And then we started talking about Infinite Frontier, and I was like, all right. I kept that thread going. I'm like, we're going to make sure Roy comes back. My plan for Roy was to get his daughter back at some point. And I was trying to figure out how. And then I got a call from editorial, and they were thinking about using her in Catwoman. And so, because they already had kind of a plan in place, they were talking about it. So I talked with them. I talked with Ron V. And I was like, actually, this makes sense. There's a way to make this work. I had questions because I can be continuity crazy sometimes. So I'm like, all I need you to do is give me a reason. like let's talk about how this is working. And then we got going with it. So yeah, there definitely is a plan for that because of course, like if, I'm not sure if but she's Shoes. She's like being trained as like Catwoman's sidekick. And so it's kind of like, what does Roy do when he finds out she's alive? And then he finds out that Shazar knows, that Jade, that she knows, that she's alive. And obviously the conflict's there. But it'll be interesting to see how we get there. Like that definitely plays a part in pieces of Infinite Frontier and then the plans for Roy after Infinite Frontier and other books that I don't want to say yet because I don't want to ruin their stories or mess their stuff up. But there definitely is a plan to get these things rolling.
I love that scene in the Zero issue where Roy calls, Ollie and Dinah and realizes, yeah, maybe not yet. And feels the same, like, maybe I really want to call everybody and let them know I'm back, but it's not time yet.
He has survivor's guilt, and he also has a little bit of, hold on. He has survivor's guilt, and he also has, sorry, I lost you for a second. He has survivor's guilt, and then he's also not sure why he's back. necessarily. You know, his memories are kind of a little screwy in places, and the last thing he really remembers was being a zombie during death metal. So it's like, he's definitely questioning things. That plays a part in Infinite Frontier. Is why me? Like, why was I chosen to come back? Not everybody's come back. So not everyone came back from the dead. And I think part of that is like he doesn't know his daughter is back, and so there's definitely like, why me, not her? And
Sure.
so that definitely weighs on him a little bit. So I think he wasn't ready. He's also a character that kind of does have a bit of a, how do I put this, like a solo nature to him at times. He loves his family, he loves his friends, but it's not totally unlike him to get on a motorcycle and ride off in the desert by himself for a little bit. And that's kind of what we're doing. And then you'll see some of the stuff at Infinite Frontier with him and the journey he kind of goes on and how he plays a really important role in that story. And then the stuff he'll do afterward.
Fair enough. Deanie wants to know how it's been working on the Secret Files issues with Stephanie and Dan Water and Brandon Thomas and others. Each has been a really cool and fun character study. Agreed.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say character study because so what happened was, when I was working on Infinite Frontier, the beginning stages of it, and we started talking about the overall picture of the DCU, and then we started talking about the actual story for Infinite Frontier, I knew that I was getting a cast of characters that weren't as known, right? I mean, some of these characters have been around a long time, like we were just talking about with, like, Jade and Obsidian. If you've been reading since New 52, the only experience you have with Jade and Obsidian is they were in the Earth 2 book, right? But it wasn't really them, So
No.
It's like there's a lot of stuff with these characters you may not know, right? And so we started having this conversation like, well, let's do a series of Secret File stories where each one showcases on these groups and just make it a character study. And I was like, that is a great idea. I have no time to do that. I'm doing way too much stuff as it is. I don't have time to do that. So I went to DC and I'm like, all right, here's the deal. Can I bring in co-writers for it? Can I get 3 co-writers? And they were like, yeah, we can do that. And then I picked. I said, I want Brandon Thomas, I want Stephanie, and I want Dan Waters. I was a fan of all of them. I had just read Harley Quinn #1, and so I was like, and I already was a fan of her, so I'm like, all right, boom, let's get Stephanie.
That's great.
I met Dan a few years ago, and he had been working on DC stuff with, he'd been doing Lucifer. And he did Coffin Bound, and I really liked his work. I knew he liked, horror stuff the same way I did. He's in the White Noise crew, and I like all those guys. So it was like, all right, him right there. Now, Brandon, I've actually known Brandon for a long time. Brandon used to write articles for Newsarama where he was doing, like, how to break into comics for himself, like his own journey of trying to break into comics. And I met him, I feel like I met him like 7 years ago, and I immediately was like, dude, I love those articles. They were really helpful for me when I was trying to break in. And so him and I have ever talked since then. And so, we would text each other every once in a while. And then he started coming in doing more stuff at DC. Obviously, he was doing Excellence. And I actually started talking to him more regularly before Excellence came out, and then, reading Excellence. And, he started doing a little bit of work at DC here and there. I brought him in to do a short in Death Metal. He did a Steel story, so I brought him in for that. And then after that, DC, they started, without me completely, they started reading the stuff like Excellence, and they were like, this guy's good, let's bring him in. And I was like, oh, this is terrific. And then he did the Aquaman story for Future State, and it was great. And I think he has, like, and he's doing hardware for Milestone. I mean, he's done a lot of stuff, and I think they have, how do I put this? DC likes him a lot. I'll put it like that. They recognize. And here's the thing with all three of them are big DC fans. They all know their shit. Like, you can have a conversation, they know the character, they know the stuff. And when I had the list of characters, it was interesting because, like, I didn't want to pick 4 of them, but I was like, all right, I'm going to give you guys a list of all 6 characters, and you guys can pick which ones you want. But in my back of my head, I'm like, but I know what I want you guys to do. Like, I knew I wanted Dan to do the Jade and Obsidian one. I knew I wanted Dan to do the Psycho Pirate one and do a really scary Psycho Pirate story. I knew that I wanted Stephanie to do the Roy story because she's a huge Green Arrow fan. And I wanted to do Bones because I knew she also knows how to do horror stuff. And then with Brandon, I was like, I want you to do the President Superman story, and I want you to do the Totality story because I know he knows all of this bigger cosmic DC stuff. And he has a lot of really big ideas about bigger DC cosmic stuff. So I was like, all right,
Okay.
I know I want these guys to do this. I'm gonna give it to them and see what happens. And then thankfully they all picked what I wanted them to pick. So then it was just a conversation, and it's been one of the easiest processes ever because there's been times in the past where I've worked on projects like this, and I have had to get in and be like heavy-handed and give notes and do a call and try to, you know, talk stuff out. This process has been so easy because it was like we just pitched the stories, they pitched me what they wanted to do, and then it was like, okay, cool, go, and then just watching the process after that, and they've just been nailing it, just nailing it each time. And so I'm glad people are enjoying them, and I'm glad they see them for what they are, which is character studies. Like they're
Absolutely.
You know who this character is, we're going to tell you. And I did compare it a lot to the beginning of Rebirth and how each one of those Rebirth issues was kind of about that. It was like, here's this person at their core, here's what's going on with them, and let's go. And that was what I told them I wanted from those. I was like, I want you guys to create stories that tell the readers this is who this character is, but now we're going a different direction with them, and we're carrying them to something else, and that's the Infinite Frontier book. Like they'll all come into that book, and the goal with that book, I compare it a little bit to like Countdown to Infinite Crisis or the 52 Weekly book, where it was like, you know, Countdown to Infinite Crisis obviously was leading into something really big, and then 52 was all of these different stories, all these different characters kind of scattered that you don't normally see, right? There was no Superman, Batman, or Wonder Woman.
That's right.
Scattered, and you get to see how they were all involved in these mysteries that all sort of crept together and eventually collided. But instead of 52 issues, it's only 6.
Okay, that's cool. The man, I'll tell you, and I've said this to James, and also, I first of all to everybody watching and listening and stuff. I want to point out my own evolution from where I was with the character to suddenly hear the ideas and going, well, that's interesting, and I'm in. Because initially, back in the New 52, when they made the Earth 2 Alan Scott gay, I'm like, well, why don't you just have a new gay Green Lantern? I'm not against gay characters, and certainly, but I'm like, God, Alan Scott's been around forever, and now all of a sudden he's gay. Well, then as I talked to James, and what I loved was the idea of, wait a minute, he was always gay and and had to hide who he was. And literally that made me lean forward and go, okay, that's a really interesting story.
Yeah,
because
it makes
beyond maintaining a secret identity, to even have to go that one step further and worry about who he really was and have to project it to, you know, contemporary heroes. Not, I mean, look, and it's going to be fun in you know, finding out who knew and who didn't know and all of that. And I love that scene in Infinite Frontier when he's just, you know, again, he comes out for Jade, and I love that Obsidian, of course, he's already had the conversation.
Figured it out, yeah. I think when you and I talked about this before Infinite Frontier Zero came out, and I was like, just read the Zero, like what James is doing. Like James knows what he's doing. We had talked about it a lot. Like James and I had conversations about it even years ago about how we were going to do it and how we knew that once Alan was back and if we got any kind of touch on him, you know, we were able to use him. That was something we had talked about. There was one point, Flash 750 that came out about it came out last January of 2020.
Yeah.
Was Flash 750, and there was going to be a line in there where Jay was going to allude to the fact that he knew that Alan was gay, right? And we decided to take it out, and the reason why we decided to take it out was because we wanted to make sure that we did it right. We wanted to actually do it in a book that was like about that, like not just a throwaway line that Jay says in an internal monologue, right? And so even since then, we were like, all right, we're going to do this. Like, when are we going to do this? But it was also about getting Alan back because it was like, you know, we were dealing with the aftermath of Doomsday Clock and
right.
Metal. So it was just a matter of time. And so that whole time, like, we were talking about it. Like, you know, James and I and DC were talking about the entire time. And so then finally, when we got around to being able to do Infinite Frontier Zero, you know, James is crazy busy. You know, I know you've talked to him. Like, he doesn't sleep. You know, he's writes like a maniac. I'm jealous of his output. You know, like he writes a lot, and he actually wrote his Batman story at Infinite Frontier much earlier. Like I wrote the frame, he wrote his Batman, and then we started after we had those pieces, we started talking to the writers. But it was like, even though he was so busy, it was like, dude, you got to write the Alan Scott scene, like because he had already done the short in the Green Lantern 80 pager a year earlier, and I was like, you gotta keep going. And so we originally reached out to Gary Frank, but Gary Frank was too busy. because we wanted to continue the thread from the 80 pager. But obviously he was going on to do other things. So we looked out, and then Stephen Burns' name came up, and we were like, let's do it. And yeah, it's a great short that introduces him and his kids, and then by then we knew we were planning with him about him going on to work with the Totality and then be a big part of Infinite Frontier. So yeah, man, it's interesting how these things take these like beats to get there sometimes, but I'm glad to hear that you like it, that you definitely see what we were doing, and it makes sense.
No, I think it's truly, it really is exciting, because it's like, okay, now really, God. And again, I read the news that obviously the TV show is in development too.
Oh, yeah.
That will have flashbacks too.
Actor is so young. I'm so curious about that show, because we don't talk to them about the show stuff as much when they're at this stage of development. Like I talk to the Flash stuff sometimes. I talk with them, but yeah, I saw that actor is so young, so I'm really curious what they're going to be doing with him. It's like in my mind, I thought, oh, Alan Scott, because this is going to sound weird. I don't know, right?
No,
Alan Scott has been an old man my entire life.
I understand.
Like, even though he was Sentinel and he was younger, he was still an older character.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like that guy's always been an old man to me. So it's interesting to see that he'll be doing a modern story as a young man. It's so interesting. I'm sure people feel the same way about Barry Allen, right? Because Barry Allen is usually an older character, and then he was super young on the TV show and stuff. So same with Ollie. Yeah.
Well, and all those Justice Society, the core members, I've just loved that idea that they can be elder statesmen. And in fact, I appreciated when during JSA they shoehorned in Earth 22, Kingdom Come, Superman, Golden Age Superman, because that's the thing. And that's what I love so much about the original Crisis on Infinite Earths, was that it's like, no, man, like 1938 Superman, he is the first hero, and you need that gravitas, and that was represented by Alan and by Jay Garrick and all those all-American heroes that they're the ones they everyone learned from their example. I would love when James Robinson would throw in and other Batman and Gotham writers.
Yeah, Golden Age is so good.
Oh my God, I love the Golden Age. And really,
Golden Age is like an Elseworld, but it definitely it's interesting how Golden Age is an Elseworld, but it 100% impacted the DCU afterwards. Like. Yeah, it's a weird mix. Like when you read it, you're like, "Oh, it's clearly an Elseworld," but it's like, "Yo, this is clearly like integrated in." You read Starman, all that stuff. You read JSA, but it's funny you said this. Like I've been rereading Crisis on Infinite Earths recently, and I've been rereading. It's funny you said the stuff about those JSA issues with Kingdom Come Superman and Magog and all that. I've been rereading that recently, and yeah, that stuff is so cool. I love when they bring all this multiverse stuff in. I don't know, as you can tell with the stuff we're working on.
Well, and so tell me about the Totality now. Explain to me that group and what's going on with them.
Totality is, man, listen, like when you look at all the things that happen in Earth Zero, right, the main DCU, their reality has been messed with so many times, right? Like over the last 30 years, there's been so many instances from Crisis on Infinite Earths to 0 Hour to obviously Flashpoint, but even looking at things like Infinite Crisis, there's all these moments where their reality has been messed with. And after Rebirth, one of the things that bugged me was that, Barry and Bruce, they knew reality had been messed with, and they didn't tell anybody, right? And they didn't really notice at first. And a lot of characters didn't really know. They didn't realize how much reality had been messed with. So at the end of Death Metal, once the multiverse was reset, and we were aware there were 2 new worlds, you have the Alpha world, and then you have Earth Omega. Once we started knowing that stuff was going on, the characters, Batman, Superman, and Flash, they decided, because again, Superman had been messed with a bunch, like coming out of Rebirth, particularly. It's like there were 2 Superman, there was a Superman Red and Blue thing kind of going on. It's like all these things were happening. The heroes basically get together and they're like, all right, here's what we got to do. We got to put together a think tank that can monitor this. Like, we need somebody who can monitor, are we being messed with? Like, is time and space and reality, all these things being messed with? And so they put this group together of 6 heroes. So it's Hawkgirl, Martian Manhunter, Mr. Terrific, and then it's Lex, Talia, and Vandal Savage. Right? It's a crazy mix of characters.
That's great.
They don't get along that well. But their job is to essentially monitor time and make sure that reality isn't being messed with. And if it is being messed with, to sort of see why. They're kind of an early warning system And that is mostly what they do. So they're not like a typical superhero team that just like goes out and hangs out and does missions together. They really only come together when they're aware something is going on. Like if they start piecing together that some character is coming in, let's say like Extant, for example. Let's say Extant is doing something. They're the ones that come in and they take care of Extant. Like they come in and make sure like, oh, here's what's up. And then Alan Scott's part of that group. He's kind of the watcher on the wall. So his job is to basically stay in the Totality and sort of monitor what is going on, right? To keep an eye on it all. So he's really busy with that. And then Wally knows what's going on with it because of his experiences, right? Because all the stuff that Wally's gone through, and all, him being somebody also that was erased and shunted off to the side, so he's kind of aware. But so their goal is that. And so they play a little bit of a role in Infinite Frontier. Not as much of a heavy role because it is so much about Alan, Obsidian, and Jade. But they're definitely in the beginning and the end of that story. And then some of those characters you'll see sort of what's going on with them in the rest of the DCU. For example, like Talia, because Talia's part of that group. That means Talia's pretty aware that stuff's been messed with, right? And it makes her anxious. I guess I'll put it like that. So for her, it's like she's looking at all this stuff and being like, there's a problem here. And I think that's what the things Infinite Frontier is about as a miniseries. And some of the stuff is splintering out is a lot of these characters are looking at this stuff and they're just like, this stuff can't keep happening. Like we can't keep having time and space messed with. We can't keep having beings from another multiverse come over here, people coming from different worlds showing up and messing stuff up. There's a scene in issue 1 of Infinite Frontier where Bones is talking to Chase about it. Director Bones from the DEO is talking to Cameron Chase. And he's just like, a being came from another world and messed with us. And she's just like, which time? Which one? And he's like, you're joking, but this happens all the time. And it has to stop at some point. And that's sort of one of the mysteries, the conspiracy that's going on is this idea of who's doing that? Is it going to happen again? And different people trying to stop it from happening. And how far would you go to make sure something like that never happened again? And there's different people in the DCU kind of getting that idea and trying to avoid it. And then what happens because you're trying so hard to avoid it. And then you got Darkseid behind it all, just being like manipulating the entire DCU in ways that you won't even notice for a while. Like it's interesting to see, how do I put this? There might be some things that are inconsistent, and there's a reason why they're inconsistent. Like there might be some things that you might, as a reader, look at and be like, "What? Like, why is that happening over here? And this is happening over here." You'll start to come together toward the end of the year, particularly next year, realizing what Darkseid is up to and what he's doing behind the scenes to mess with the DCU. And he has a really big plan. It's like the biggest plan he's ever had.
That's great that it's gotten that meta in terms of the different from New Frontier to
because it bugged me,
or rather New 52. Say it again, Jack.
Because it bothered me. Like as a reader, but also working on the books, like, when we got to that scene, where Barry and Bruce were talking about Flashpoint and the letter and the button and all this stuff, it bugged me that they just didn't call a meeting with the Justice League and be like, yo, somebody is messing with us. The fact that Wally told Barry that there is a being out there that is watching us, that is manipulating us, and there's going to be all these things happening, there's going to be a war and all this stuff, and then they never told anybody else. In the meeting today, I was talking about that because we were like, you gotta, because of the plans we have for next year and the stuff that we're working on for next year, it was like, well, okay, like it's important to me that characters are still working in character, and there's also a sense of logic there. So it's like, if one character figures out what's really going on, they should tell people.
Well, yeah,
right? Like they should go out and be like, yo, it's interesting because we were having this conversation about Bruce and like what would happen if Bruce found out where Damian was. So it's like, okay, well, if Bruce does find out where Damian is, why doesn't he go there immediately? Okay, well, let's come up with a story reason why, or at least come up with something. Don't just ignore it. But that was why. That's like the meta-ness of it. I mean, that's part of Infinite Frontier, man. It's definitely a bit of Bones and Chase operating as the reader in some ways. And part of Bones' motivation is that realistically Bones has event fatigue. Like he's looking at this stuff and he's just like, man, these events keep happening and they keep getting worse and worse, and we got to stop them from happening. Like we can't ever have another event. Essentially, it's Bones' thing, and then you have Chase over here being like, that genie's out of the bottle. Like, we can't keep, so it's interesting seeing the dynamics and then, the push and pull of the story. But yeah, that's definitely part of Bones' motivation is he's got event fatigue and he doesn't want any more events.
And as Nathan asks, can you give us any hints about the upcoming Elseworlds book?
No.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I can't. Listen, people working on it. I don't know how much people know about that book. I'm actually trying to think if people working on it is kind of out there. No, but it definitely will tie in a lot of the stuff we have planned. It's very exciting. I obviously know who's working on it, and that's the most I can say without spoiling anything, because I don't want to mess up somebody else's like whole plan. And yeah.
I understand. Yeah, Nathan.
Sorry,
sometimes you got to read the stories, and I know I'm messing with you, Nathan. But
I mean, you almost had me for a second there because I was like, "Wait, was that announced?" So I don't know. We'll see.
No, that's all we got is the name of the book. There you go. Well, and also obviously, then
I don't know. I know what you're talking about, but I'm not sure if that's the name of the book or not.
I'm sorry, Josh. I keep talking over you. Please repeat yourself.
Okay. Oh, I was just saying, is that the name of the book? I mean, I know what you're talking about, but we'll see when we get there.
Okay, well, and it's funny because he said, along with like 10 other announcements like Deathstroke Incorporated.
Oh, that's right. They did release that list. Yeah. I think not every title on there was the final title for those books when they released that list. I totally forgot about that. They released those 10 books. Yeah.
But clearly, with this problem and that time and reality keeps getting rewritten, Future State is a possible future.
It's a possible future.
That again we're seeing because of manipulation, and we'll see how when current events come to head with these future state events, obviously,
and how it's different. I mean, that's definitely if any character finds out about future state, what happens after that, right? Like that definitely plays a part, and you can already see some of the differences coming true. But yeah, that'll definitely be part of the plan. You'll see how it all adds up. I think there were a lot of things in Future State that were teased that will eventually come together next year. I mean, that was one thing also. That was one of my goals with post Future State and Infinite Frontier is that sometimes we drag out these things, right? We drag out the stories too long or we drag out a tease for too long. And so I really wanted to make sure that the stuff we were teasing, we had a plan for and we knew when it was coming and we knew, you know what I mean? We weren't teasing it and then going to kick it down the field 3 years. It was like, we knew there was a plan for those things to come around fairly quickly. So, like even on the Infinite Frontier story that I'm telling, it'll end by the end of next year, and the books that I'm working on next year. So, I didn't want to drag this stuff out too long.
I understand. Now there's some silly questions that I'm not even going to post because they would obviously be plot questions. And again, read the book.
I mean, I can probably answer a plot question. I can
Please.
say,
is Barry going to die in Infinite Frontier? Really?
Barry
really, Landon?
What Barry does in Infinite Frontier will be very important for what happens next year. I mean, he definitely. It's a big role. He plays a really big role. He's actually not in the book that much. He's in the beginning, the middle, a little bit through. He's in every issue, but the very beginning, the middle, and then he plays a huge role in the ending. And then what happens at the ending will definitely impact the DCU for a while. I mean, that's really the thing about Infinite Frontier. I think you'll see, once we get to the end, you'll see how much it like greatly impacts things and starts to tie up the stuff for next year.
Okay. And Shisui Salty, I want to make sure I said his name right. We got the I Am Batman announcement today. Will you be writing Damian meeting Jace in the Robin book, given you've written Jace more than anyone other than John Ridley?
I'd like to. I would like to have Damian and Jace meet at some point. I don't necessarily have plans for that, but that's a good point. I do have plans to write Jace again. But I haven't really thought much about Damian because Damian's on an interesting path. It's like because when he comes back to Gotham, he's mostly focused on his father, right? Like that's mostly what he wants to do. and then Jace's role in the Bat family and stuff like that. I don't want to give away, and the plot moves that are going on with him. I'm not sure how much information is actually out there, but there won't really be necessarily too much of a reason for them to meet right out the gate. But yeah, I do plan on writing Jace again. I really like that character, so I do have it's part of my plans involve him.
Okay. Oddish says, will Batgirls get a solo anytime soon? I'm assuming book.
Say you should read Fear State.
There you go. Very nice.
See what's
well
going
said.
on. Yeah. I would definitely say read Fear State.
Okay. Let's see here. I'm kind of, let's see. Oh, here's a new question. Oh, have you talked? All right. Yeah. And here's, all right. This is an interesting question, Nathan.
Mm-hmm.
Have you talked with Tom Taylor about Damian and John Kent? Yeah. Where's the friendship right now?
Yeah. Yeah. I talk to John. I talk to Tom probably about once a week. We just talked yesterday, actually. They were in Action Comics, I think, like 2 weeks ago together, Damian and John. So, John knows where Damian is, but he's not going to rat him out to anybody. And then John obviously is all the stuff he's going on with, that's going on in his life. I have read Superman #1, Tom's new Superman book. And I would say definitely read that because there's some stuff in there that'll, I think, make some of the Super Sons fans happy. We're all big fans. I know I feel of Super Sons and that relationship and that friendship. It's like, there's definitely stuff in the works for the two of them. Like, there's a lot of conversations. We were just talking about it yesterday morning. So yeah, there's definitely some stuff with them. And yeah, I do talk to Tom about it. Like, we share stuff with each other. I actually just yesterday was showing him some covers to Damian, and he'll send me stuff to read, and yeah.
All right, fair enough. Nerdette wants to know, will we see more of the Bat family in Gotham Future State?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, at the end of issue 1, if you read issue 1, at the ending, Nightwing, Tim, Stephanie, and Duke all showed up. And I mean, the book is not it's a book about Gotham, right? So it's not just about Jason Todd. And so the next issue 2 has all of them, and then from that point on, they're basically supporting characters in the book. And it will there'll be some issues that are about other people in the Bat family, not just about Jason. So like issue 4, for example, is not about Jason, it's about somebody else.
Okay.
And as we go on, there'll be more and more involvement of the rest of the Bat family. The first couple issues do have a lot of Jason and Jace in it. But at that point, we basically have all of them in there. And there's other stuff that's going to involve Future State characters and things like that are Bat characters. But yeah, like, they'll all be in there. I want to get as many as I can. And then also Dennis Culver, who I co-write that book with, like, he is a huge Batman fan. He loves Batman, and I think he wants to do all of it. Like, he wants to write as many of those characters as possible and get as many of those Future State characters in there as possible. So I mean, if I wasn't trying to get all the Bat family in there, he would definitely. And he has a lot of ideas for that book and a lot of great plans that he wants to do with it. So as many of those Bat characters as we can, we're going to get into that book. Yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned Dennis, because I saw that you guys are working together, and I've enjoyed his stuff back when he and Chris Robertson were doing Edison Rex, that great Monkey Brain digital book.
Yeah. I've known Dennis. I want to say 20 years. He was a customer at a comic book store I worked at, like 20 years ago. He would come in, and then somehow, like, I moved to Portland, and I was in Portland for like a week, and he just suddenly walked up to my table, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And we were at a Stumptown, a really small convention up here, and they don't do it anymore, but they used to. And he just like went to my table, and he was like, "This is like back in 2008, I think." And he was like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "What are you doing here?" It was such a like thing, and so we've been we talk all the time, and obviously it's somebody else I talk to every day. You'd be surprised how much time I spend on the phone talking to other comic book creators. It's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, I've been in constant communication with Dennis and James and Scott, and then again, I talk to a bunch of different people. So yeah, I spent a lot of time on the phone.
Shisui wants to know, there was a whole discourse about how Jace saved Gotham in your Future State Justice League book. Is that still something in the back of your mind when writing the book?
Oh yeah. That's definitely a part of it. You know, again, not getting too deep into some spoilers. One thing to keep in mind about that scene, it was interesting when I saw a little bit of the discourse about that. It's funny, and I'm sure you've had this conversation with other creators before. At the beginning of Future State Justice League, there's a scene where Tio Maro is giving a speech about the Justice League and about how much he hates them, right? And he's definitely a lot of hyperbole, a lot of embellishment in his story. And it was interesting because I would see people kind of respond to that as if that was me saying or DC saying it. And I'm like, you guys know it was like the villain saying that stuff, right? Like this guy who hates them and is being like kind of mocking them. He's literally mocking them, says that stuff. So it was interesting to see people being like, what? I can't believe he would say this. And I'm like, he's the villain, dude. Like, it's always interesting when people you can sell, like, and I see this sometimes. I'm sure you have this conversation with other creators. Like, I know this has happened with a few other creators where they get accused of believing something the villain is saying, and you're like, no, they're the bad guy. Of course they're gonna say like crazy stuff. They're the bad guy. But yeah, that stuff. How to put this? Pretty much everything that I put in that scene where Tio Mara was talking about all of them, those were all tied into stuff we had plans for and we knew we were like working on and conversations we had, and it just like make them out of complete nowhere. Yeah.
All right, Eduardo wants to know if the GSA plays a role in Infinite Frontier. Certainly, individuals are playing a role.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's definitely some stuff in there, and you'll see kind of what's playing around with it, and it's been really fun revisiting a lot of the JSA stuff and going back and doing research. And you know, I at one point I had a complete scene rewritten. I had a whole plan for this scene with Alan and Obsidian, and I was going to have them interrogating an old JSA villain. And I was looking into JSA villains and thinking about who I wanted to use. And then I was like, oh man, I know who I wanted to talk to, the Shade. And so I completely rewrote the scene because they're not interrogating him. They're sitting down for a cup of tea because it's the Shade, you know? And that completely changed the whole scene around and stuff. But yeah, there's definitely JSA stuff going on for sure.
Well, that's great to hear that the Shade is back because I loved, again, back to James. You know, James Robinson, what he did in Starman and stuff. No, the Shade's only become a much more interesting character in modern day, and really, and that's why I love the idea that Vandal Savage is part of the group that's trying to correct things. That's terrific. You know, the Immortal that's been there since the start, and if anyone knows, he knows what's changed.
Exactly, we picked him because of the fact that he had been around for so long. You know, it's like him. Another character I thought about putting into that group was Resurrection Man, but I wasn't sure if he was going to fit as much. But like, I was really glad, man. When I saw the Resurrection Man was in Future State, and it was like the future version of him, the DC 1 million version. I was so happy. Like, I was one of those things. It's weird, dude. I'm so plugged in with so much of what's going on at TC, and I talk to so many creators. Like, I'm very rarely surprised by something at this point, right? Because I know about it so far in advance. But every once in a while, like I was reading that issue of Future State, and suddenly there was Resurrection Man, and I was like super pumped. I was just like, yes, somebody put Future State in this, or put Resurrection Man in this. This is great.
Landon wants to know when Aquaman and Green Arrow will get books.
You know, with Aquaman, I would say, and you and I talked about this before, with Aquaman in particular, they have really awesome plans for Aquaman. I mean, one thing I would keep in mind is that there's like an Aquaman movie coming, like another one. So obviously they have very big Aquaman plans. You know, I think the stuff they have planned for Aquaman is so cool. You know, the creative teams they have working on it, it's awesome. And I think it's some of the coolest stuff I've seen somebody do with Aquaman and the Aquaman mythology and the Aquaman characters. The plan they have for it it's really interesting. I think it's really cool. It's different. But to me, like when I see the big strategy of it, I'm like, that's really cool. Like I love that kind of, without giving it away, the stuff they have, I think is really, really cool. And it's a great way to do an Aquaman series. With Green Arrow, not getting too much into spoiler stuff. Oh, that's one thing. Yeah, he just said the Aquaman 80th. I would definitely read the Aquaman 80th anniversary special. Like, if you're a big Aquaman fan, you want to know what's going on, you should read that special.
Sure.
You know, but with Green Arrow, I don't want to get too deep into spoilers, but obviously there's Green Arrow stuff going on. I mean, we were just talking about today. It's like all the Green Arrow family is sort of splintered out across the DCU. You know, you have Green Arrow and Justice League, and he's also doing stuff with Checkmate. Black Canary is in Justice League, but she's also in something else that hasn't been announced yet. And then it's like Connor's in Robin, and Roy's going to be in Infinite Frontier, and then Roy will go on to be in another story. It's like we have this huge Green Arrow family kind of thrown out across the DCU. Of course, we're going to do a story about them coming back together and what that actually means. I mean, I think we all want to see that. We want to see those characters get to see each other for the first time. In a lot of ways, see each other for the first time in over 10 years. So there's definitely plans for that and a lot of conversations for when those beats will happen. I think there'll be some really fun stuff with that, especially beginning of next year, I think, if I remember this stuff correctly.
Oddish has a good question regarding what do the civilians, the non-metas, think about the endless crisis that has happened before? Yeah, all the will we see the civilians realize that reality is changing as much as it is?
That's an issue one of Infinite Frontier, you know, and yeah, it's a major part of that series. Is that as part of why Bones and Chase are doing what they're doing, but that's a part of issue 1 is people on the ground. Like I wanted to show, you know, a big part of my motivation with all the stories I'm doing when it comes to the event stuff and the bigger stories is about showing these big stories from different points of view that we don't normally see, right? Like I've seen these big events from either the massive like Justice League level or Batman Superman level. I want to see these stories from characters I don't normally see them from. And I think that was the strength of some of those things like, you know, we were talking about before, like JSA and 52 and again, Countdown to Infinite Crisis. You get to see the story from Blue Beetle's perspective. You know, I always like those stories where you get to see the massive DCU stuff from different characters' point of view. But I have always been fascinated about people on the street. Like, what does somebody living in Gotham think about the Bat stuff? You know, do they even believe in Batman? And that's part of Infinite Frontier is you have these people that are kind of in denial about what is going on, right? They're in denial that reality was rewritten. Like, how do you process that information? If you're just like a normal person working a normal job, how do you process that? Like, oh my God, our reality has been rewritten multiple times. And a creature called the Batman Who Laughs came here and completely rewrote our world, right? And it's like some people are in total denial about it. Some people are just like, you know, they're fascinated by it. They have a lot of questions. There's a scene in issue 2 where Chase is basically interrogating Batman and Superman about it. And they're like, we filed the paperwork, you know, they're like, we took care of it. And Chase is just like, listen, reality's been rewritten so many times. Hearing the Justice League took care of it is not going to fly anymore.
Yeah, not good enough.
Yeah, people want to know what happened. And they're just like, are we under investigation? And she's like, I'm just asking questions. You know, it's like I wanted to show that kind of stuff throughout the book and show different perspectives, those kinds of things, you know, and so yeah, definitely we'll see people on the street. You know, we're gonna see some I'll say random people, you know, some people will come back later in the story, but that's the role kind of Chase plays in a lot of ways, is the reader sort of asking those questions of like, what happened, and can you explain to us what happened? Like, there's a part in issue 1 where somebody is like, Superman came out and he explained it, and I did not understand it. Like, so, you know, I wanted to show that stuff. Like, you know, that's just part of my thought process on all the stuff we're doing. Yeah,
is a byproduct of the omniverse status quo. Mm-hmm. The idea that you can, if somebody, like I was just talking to somebody else about, you know, the Clark Kent reveal. And it's like, if somebody really has a great Daily Planet story where Superman needs to be Clark Kent in the story, is that something that editorial will consider? And it's sure, why not? I mean, or a Superboy story where it's Silver Age Superboy, that like we saw it,
Yeah, why not? Yeah, I mean, at this point, I feel like why not? If you have a story you want to tell, I mean, look at like Superman Smashes the Klan. Right, it's like if you have a story you want to tell, we can find a place for it. Like, I don't think there's anything.
That's true. That's a good point.
And then a lot of times those books can become worlds in the multiverse. Not every book we've ever done, not every Elseworld got their own world. Right, like, remember when they were doing those Elseworld annuals that one year? They did like 2 years in a row. Right, they would do all those annuals every year, had a theme. There was like a pulp one. There
Yes.
was Scorched. I think it was called Scorched Earth. Might have been called Dead Earth. They did that one. You know, it was like all those Elseworlds that they've done over the years. Not every single one of them got a world, right?
I hear you.
But,
yeah.
You know, yeah. I mean, I think with the way that things are kind of moving and changing, and also if you look at the map, if you look at the multiverse map, there were spots on there that were left with question marks, and so sometimes we could fill those things in. This was a conversation we had today about filling in one of those worlds. So you know, there's room to do whatever you want to do, especially if it's a good story. Like I would never want to be like, oh, we can't do this really great story because it doesn't map into this world, this map we have. Let's play around, and you know, there's definitely some stuff going on. But that's part of what Infinite Frontier is that the multiverse is growing and there are new worlds popping up. So it gives us an opportunity to kind of create, like you said, new worlds.
All right. Well, here Landon's got a great question for you, given the amount of Flash work you did, and I'm a little disappointed that it's just these two that he's asking. Who do you think is the better Flash, Barry or Wally? What about Jay? Come on.
How about what about Eobard, man? No, you know, it's weird with that because I feel like there is no character that I have written more than Barry, obviously, right? And there were times where it gets to a weird thing where like Barry is me, I am Barry. You know, it's like when you're literally writing somebody for 5 years in their head, and I was writing that book one script every 2 weeks for 5 years. Like that dude was in my head. Like I've had Barry on my head for 5 years, like nonstop. So it's like, to me, I have no more of a personal connection with any other DC character than I do with Barry. And it's interesting, like even what I was saying before, like I was planning on leaving the Flash behind, but also leaving DC behind. It's interesting, even though I finished writing the Flash, you know, last year, and we're coming up on a year almost of me personally being done writing it, but I'm still writing the Flash family in some way or another, right? It's like between, you know, Speed Metal and some of the stuff, like if there was any scene with Barry and Wally in Death Metal, that scene was written by me. So it's like, you know, or like all the crossovers like we did, you know, with Last Stories, all the stuff, and then I would talk to Scott about them. It's like I wrote all these things, and so I haven't left that family behind, and Barry and Wally, like I love stuff with them. I'm writing next year, and I was just talking to them about the Flash today, and Jeremy Adams and I were messaging each other yesterday. He's a new Flash writer because I really like what he's doing in the book, and so you know the issue that came out this week where Wally was running around in Jay's body, you know, so he and I were talking yesterday a little bit, but to answer your question, it's weird, man, because Barry is like so personal to me, but I definitely grew up with Wally. Right, like Wally is. So it's weird. It's like I have the character I'm closest with, but the character's my favorite. This is a tough question to get into.
I understand. Well, again, as an older reader who lived with Barry most of my life, and then loved and was, I mean, good Lord, when he dies in Crisis, it was such an impactful death, and I loved the evolution of Wally and him really stepping up and becoming the Flash. And as much as I was thrilled when Jeff Johns brought, you know, Barry back and everything, and everyone was so angry, and it's like, there's again, this is why it's like, no, that's the heart of DC is the fact that there's legacy, and they can all exist and have different voices and all be vital. And truly, I miss Jeff revisited it in Infinite Crisis when Golden Age Superman tells modern Batman, Bruce, I know you don't know who I am, but I know who you are, and you're the one man I will always trust. And it's like, yeah, man, we love it. We love moments like that as readers. Or, my God, Rebirth. I mean, it made us cry when, you know, Barry hugs Wally, and it's like, well, how could I forget you? And it's like, yeah, man, come on.
That's what we want. I mean, we want those moments like, and it's some of my favorite stuff to write is those moments where these characters, like again, also like having Damian and Connor just like hanging out for a minute, talking about their dads, like I love writing that stuff, but dude, like this is one of the things I think about a lot with DC is how important the legacy and the generational stuff is. I think it is, you know, like I'm a big Marvel fan too, right? Like I'm not gonna lie, like I have a huge Marvel thing right here. I think I said to you before, I have Captain America's shield chilling right next to me every day. It's like it's literally sitting like right here next to my desk.
Boy. There you go.
I got my stuff in here, you know. I'm addicted to Marvel Unlimited. I read a lot of Marvel books.
Me too, man.
I'm gonna try to
Me too.
reread all of Immortal Hulk before the ending in a few weeks. Like I want to read it all before the end, you know. So it's like I'm definitely a Marvel guy, but at the same time as a DC guy, right? I'm not gonna lie, but there's differences between the two universes, right? And one of them is the generational stuff and the sidekicks, right? And now Marvel now is starting to get into that. You can see, you know, I think the stuff with Miss Marvel and the stuff with Miles, like you could tell they're starting to get more into that, obviously.
Absolutely.
So DC, it's so generational stuff. It's so about the families, you know, it's and how they can all coexist, right? And I think that was one of the goals post Death Metal, post like going into Infinite Frontier, was to be like, we can have it both ways. Like, why not? Like, who says we can't?
Right.
We can have it all. So let's have it all. Let's just go for it.
Yep.
Like, we can have multiple versions of these characters. Why not? Like, why can't we have Alan as Green Lantern and then have Hal and Sean and Guy and Kyle? Like, let's just go for it. Like, why are the only ones that are allowed to have multiple versions? Can we have multiple versions of these characters? Like, who says we can't? Is there a rule I missed somewhere? But it's like, again, I think that's the thing about Wally, and sometimes I think the same thing about Dick, is that the two of them, we got to see them grow up, right? And we got to see them go through this evolution. And I think it's part of why we, with those two characters particularly, I think that's why people sort of latch onto them in a lot of ways because of that. But, you know, I mean, I pay attention enough to DC fandom. I can see that's the stuff that they love too. You know, they love that stuff. And so do I. Like, I love when these characters get to just hang out sometimes and get to kind of have those moments, get to see them actually grow as characters and, you know, and have these team ups. But the team ups aren't always like we go out there and we fight. Do you remember there was an issue of one of my favorite issues of Gotham Knights? I think it was Devin Grayson wrote it.
I know what you're going to say, and I just talked to Devin about it. Tell the story.
You're talking about Aquaman, right? Yeah, like the two of them, you know, Aquaman shows up and is going to help Batman get the penny out of the bottom because it fell during the earthquake. And the two of them work together. He pulls it up, and they get up there. They're both exhausted. Aquaman is like, you know, you could just call him and get a beer. Like, we don't got to do all this. And to me, that's like one of the, like, oh, boom, nailed it. I think about that issue a lot and being like, that is some of the stuff, man. And you get that, you get, I think it's Gotham Central number 8. I think that's the exact issue. But I love stuff like that, you know. It's just like when you look at post crisis, you look at post crisis Infinite Earths, they kind of broke everybody apart a little bit.
Yes.
Right? They kind of broke everybody apart, and it took a minute to get them there. You know, I remember every time there was a Superman Batman crossover, I would lose my mind. I was so like every time the two of them were together, because it felt special because they definitely broken them up a little bit. And so I understand the idea of breaking them up and bringing them back together. Like I was, you know, I understand that sometimes in comics there are destroyers and there are builders. I think we're definitely in build mode right now. But we can see, like I was talking to Marie about this a few weeks ago. We were like, you can see that you can have both. You can get away with both, and you can bring together some of these characters. But yeah, with Wally, you know, it's interesting because he's a character we've seen go through so many changes, and I'm glad we got him back, and now he is, you know, on this path that he's on. And I think if people are reading the book, he'll be happy, and they'll get the stuff in the summer. And there's a Flash annual coming out the last week of June. I think that's like a crucial issue to read that kind of sets up some of the stuff that's going on. And yeah, man, it's a lot of. It's interesting to be able to see the
generations merge, mix.
Yeah, and it's always been something I've always liked is all the generational stuff and the legacy stuff, and I think it's such a core part of DC. And when you get rid of it, it just feels like it's missing no matter what. And so you're like, "Why? Like, let's just keep it, and then tell stories with it."
Absolutely.
Like that was really my thing with the Flash. Like, you know, when I was working on Flash, it took me 100 issues to get everybody back. Like, and it, you know, it was a fight the whole time. But it took me 100 issues to get pretty much everybody back. Right? I got Bart, I got Jesse, I got Max. Like I was able to get as many people as I could back.
Yep.
And you know, it took 100 issues, and then my whole thing was after that, it was like, you know, we got them all back, and then I'm the one that's like, all right, we're gonna separate Barry and Wally. But like I do feel like having all those characters back, now you can tell stories with all of them together. And I think that's something that's different. Here's the thing about that. if it was only a Wally book and only Wally in it and no other characters, it's like I've seen that book. If it's only Barry by himself, you just had it for 10 years.
Yep.
Now you get to have a book with those characters together, and that makes it different than what you've been reading the last 10 years.
Agreed.
Right? Like, we haven't really, even before that, like, there was never a time where the Flash book was starring Barry and Wally on a regular basis, at least in the last, like, I would say 30 years, right?
Yeah,
like
I would agree.
Barry would show up every, whatever issues. He was in issue 200 of Jeff's run, and then he was again in 225, right? So it's like you're able to see Barry kind of bounce in the book with these special appearances. And then when Barry came back and Wally was in, so that's probably the last time it was a book like that was Flash Rebirth, was you had all those Flash characters in one book together. During the Brightest Day Flash stuff with Barry, Wally was in it every once in a while. And especially once you get past the first arc, the first 7 issues, he was in it a little bit. But then after that, he's gone. And when I was on, Flash, I was always trying to fight to get Wally back in that book. And that's what led to Flash War. And they were like, well, if you're going to do Flash War, you have to seed Barry. You have to seed Wally in it. And so I'm like, oh, man, that's awesome. So I got to have Wally in the book from 39 through 51. And that's the last time you've been able to have that where the two of them are in the book together. I mean, it kind of sucked they had to, like, fight throughout. but I got to have them in the book. And so that's the thing now. Like, if you're reading it right now, it's they're in the book right now a little bit with each other. And then obviously Barry's going to go on to do Infinite Frontier stuff. But eventually we'll get them all back together. You got to do this kind of with it.
Well, all right, hanging on the idea of Flash, Comic Boom has an interesting question. Is the Flash in Justice League Last Ride Barry or Wally? Also, who is the Flash in Bendis' Justice League, Barry or Wally? Because it's not clear. Hair color mix-ups between red and blonde.
Yeah, I don't know what happened in Justice League. I don't know why. I actually I got to read that issue before it came out, and I emailed immediately and was like, oh, hey, I know it's supposed to be Barry because Barry hasn't left yet, right? Barry hasn't left for Infinite Frontier yet. He doesn't do that until Infinite Frontier starts coming out, like issue 1. And so I was like, somebody made a mistake, and they were like, oh no, it already went to print. So we just missed it. It was just a mistake. So it's supposed to be Barry that was in that first issue of Justice League. They just accidentally wrong. Which had happened before in another issue, like I think it was Bendis' like second issue of Superman. They accidentally colored Barry's hair as red. I don't know what happened. It's just an accident. As far as Last Ride is kind of its own thing. It's not.
It's not a continuity story,
but it's not a continuity story. No, so it's kind of over here to the side, and I believe that's Wally that's in that book. I'm pretty certain it's Wally, but that's definitely a book on the side. That book was in the works for a while. Like I was glad when it finally got announced, and I love Chip. Like Chip is a great creator, and he's damn funny. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Wally. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And Aztec Gold says, "Hey guys, how you doing, Aztec? Good to see you. Fantastic." No, I'm very excited. I appreciate the meta of the purpose behind Infinite Frontiers and everything that's going on. Yeah. There you go. Jonathan also confirming that it was Wally. And yeah, all right.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I would wait and see. I mean, I would see what's going on with Flash this summer too when it comes to some of the costume stuff. But yeah, man, Infinite Frontier, it's gonna be an interesting book because it definitely is a bit more in that vein of like how and then how 52 the weekly book was, where it is a bit.
We lost you for a second, so start again, Josh, because you froze for a second.
Okay, I was saying that Infinite Frontier is intended to be a much more of a quieter story. It definitely has a lot of explosions in it, and there's a lot of action that goes on. But it's like with Death Metal. Death Metal was this giant concert. I wanted to do something that felt more like a house show. It's like a band in a smaller venue, just playing the hits. But but with that book, like Infinite Frontier, yeah, it really is like it's Act 1 of a much, much bigger plan. And I think that's where you'll start to see the seeds of what's going on. It'll get real obvious real quick. I think people try to piece it together, but the book is it's a mystery, right? There's a character. So, in the book, you got Roy, you got Chase, you got President Superman, you got, Alan Scott and Obsidian, you got Jade, obviously Barry and Psycho Pirate is in it. There's some other characters that you'll see that are showing up, and then there's one character we haven't revealed yet who plays like a major role in the story. I think we're revealing it next week. That plays a huge role, and I think when people see that character, you're gonna be like, oh shit, like, okay, now we're gonna start piecing together what's going on, and you'll start seeing like, yeah, there's a big mystery that's happening on Earth Zero and a mystery in the multiverse, and they're going to collide with each other, and then you'll see how that impacts the DCU moving forward. And it's really what Infinite Frontier is it's getting all the pieces on the table we need to do something really big next year. And this is really about getting all those pieces on the table, and then we start bringing in some of the bigger characters, and then you start bringing in some of the newer characters that have been coming in, and then we get some of the really big stuff with Darkseid that we have planned. It's gonna be pretty nutty, dude. But I think when people read issue 1, you're gonna be like, oh, like it's so obvious, like it's pretty spelled out what's coming, and you'll start seeing it, and then But yeah, the book is a lot of fun to write. It's really complicated to keep all the different story threads together because it's very Game of Thrones-ish, where it's like there's 6 different story threads, and they all collide gradually across the 6 issues, and then it'll have a cliffhanger that is very much pointing to other things.
All right, PM Lost has been asking this question since we started. Forgive me, PM, that I didn't see it earlier. But are we going to see more Ravager and Red Hood together?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Very good, and I like
Ravagers, that. Yeah, I mean, Ravager's in Robin. She's a supporting character in Robin. She'll be a supporting character for a bit. So yeah, of course, we'll eventually, they'll definitely connect. She's not going to be in Future State Gotham much. Like, I think there's some plans for her after the first arc to possibly come back into the book. Dennis and I have been talking about it of why she eventually comes back around. But in terms of like present continuity, Jason's also super busy. Like, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of plans for Jason beyond the story that he's in Urban Legends right now. But eventually, yeah, I want to get them back together. There's a scene in 5. They kind of starts to hint at the fact that they still talk. Like they talk on the regular secretly. So we'll eventually start to play that stuff in.
Okay. And Kenneth, I don't know how, as you point out, I know you can't answer this, Joshua, but when is Supergirl going to get her own series again? Well, obviously we got King's series coming out.
It's so good. Have you read it? Did Tom send it to you?
He sent it to me. I haven't had a chance to read it yet because he was very sweet and did my 16th anniversary show, and I do intend to talk to him in a couple weeks before it comes out, and go full balls out on it and stuff. Yeah, but yeah, I'm really, I trust Tom. Tom always tells a good story, so much like yourself.
I think issue 1 is one of the best things he's done for DC. Like, immediately start reading it and you're like, he's doing something different with it. And I think it's I don't know the whole story. I know bits and pieces of it, and you talk to Tom all the time, so you know a lot of stuff with that book. And I think it's great, and I'm excited to see what people think about it. It comes out in like 3 weeks, I think. So
yeah, beginning of June. Yeah,
I'm really excited to see what people think of that book. I think it's great.
I'm excited.
Beyond those 8 issues, I'm not necessarily sure. I know there are Supergirl plans beyond that. I just don't know exactly where those plans are going to fall.
Well, and also, I mean, they did just wrap up the book last year. Wasn't it last year? I think it was last year. And right. Yeah, I mean, sometimes say it again.
I said it was right now because it ended like right now a year ago. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, and you're getting Tom's story, and I'm sure Supergirl will figure back in the future. She's a great character. So yeah, don't relax. I mean, it's gonna happen. Well, I mean, that's the thing too about like some of the stuff. It's interesting right now, particularly when I talk to people about some of these books and some of these characters. It's like with the stuff I'm working on next year, and the bigger stuff I'm working on for next year. It's like I feel like it's gonna star everyone, right? Like everyone in the DCU is gonna be a part of that book in some form or another. So getting Supergirl in there would be great. It'd be cool. I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly how she'd play into the book. So yeah, I'm not completely sure on. I know there are plans for her, but yeah, Read that book. I mean, if you're a Supergirl fan, you should read it.
Of
I think you
course.
should read what Tom is doing, especially Belquist. Belquist's art on that shit is so good. That's going to be a really cool collection someday. That whole book, I think it's great.
All right, here's another. And man, guys, I apologize. I just think some of the questions are like, do the math, kids. But so forgive me, but
I don't
well,
mind.
and there might be another answer to this, so I will put it up there. Is there a specific reason that John and Jace are Superman and Batman, but Yara Flores Wonder Girl instead of Wonder Woman? And here's my answer. Well, there's going to be another Wonder Woman movie, and also Diana has a big role of what's happening currently. And I'm assuming that they don't want to confuse people, and then also they can introduce potentially a Yara Flor story without saying no, she's Wonder Woman, and it's like, well, whatever. So that's my answer. What do you think?
There are kind of story reasons for that, to get to that, but that is a great question. I think that is a great question. John, why is John not Superboy? Right? Like why is John not just Superboy? I think in some instances of this, it's going to be what's going on in the book itself. Like, obviously, if you're reading Superman, you know what. If you're reading Superman in action, you know what Superman's going through, so you know why John is going to have to step up at some point, and how the changes are going to take place for Superman and what he is going to go do, being in Grant's Superman the Authority book. With her not being called Wonder Woman right out the gate, man, that's a great question. But I think you'll get to that. I know some of the plans for her in that, so we'll eventually. What was that last question? I missed it.
Oh, it wasn't a question. Kenneth had a statement just saying he's excited for King's Supergirl, and the covers look great, and the art and for the preview for issue 1 looks amazing. Absolutely, man.
That's a great question.
So, all right, and here Joey says, I understand what you mean, John, because the Batman movie's coming out, and Jace is still being Batman. So, no, I understand, and you're right about that shit.
Yeah, that's a great question.
That flies in the face. You're absolutely right about that, man. Jam back.
They have coming down the line for Yara, and I think we'll eventually get to that without giving away too many spoilers. But that's a great question why they decided to call the book a Wonder Girl.
And she, again, Nathan, I agree. She's got to be Wonder Girl first. She hasn't even met the Amazons yet.
Yeah. We'll get there.
Yeah.
That book is good. That book is great. Like, the book just came out.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah, Joelle kicked
I already read it.
Yeah,
Joelle. I'm so happy for Joelle. I mean, on all fronts. She's always been an amazing artist. Lady Killer's fantastic. I'm glad it's being made into a series, but I'm glad she's getting her writing opportunities. Her Catwoman run was great. It continues to be great with Ram V, but I'm really digging what she's doing with Wonder Girl. It's very cool.
She's a Portland person too. She's up here, and I've known her for a long time. It's crazy. Like, about, I would say 10 years ago, maybe more, 11 years ago, I was going on a train from Portland to Seattle for Emerald City Comic Con, and I get on this train, and I see Joelle and Jamie. Like Jamie Rich, and because they obviously work together, they did Lady Killers together, so I ended up sitting with them. I did not know them that well. Like, I kind of knew them from Portland stuff, but I'd only been in Portland for a little bit, like maybe about a year, so I didn't really know them that well. And so the three of us took this train ride up together, and we talked about movies, talked about comics, and now, so it's super weird that like where we were then on that train ride versus where we are now, where it's like I'm doing stuff I'm doing, she's done such great work at DC. And then Jamie is the group editor for Superman, Justice League, like anything not Batman. He's the group editor, for all those books. And so it's pretty crazy now to look at that and be like where the three of us are at now versus where we were, like 11 years ago on that train.
That's so funny.
Yeah, that book is beautiful. It's great.
That's funny. I had my bonding with Joelle like 10 years ago. She was in Chicago for a signing at Challengers. And we ended up going to do karaoke with the owner of Challengers, and we had a blast. And the funny thing, and it's always like, it's like we got to sing together again, man. We haven't sung in 10 years. She's like, yeah, you're right.
I mean, it's wild about some of the stuff like coming up in comics and the people you meet along the way. Like I met Scott and Kyle Higgins both at a C2E2 in 2010. And all of us were just like, I think, American Vampire #1 had just come out at that convention because they were giving away right? They were giving it away at the table. So it just come out. And, that's how I met Scott was at that convention. And then, Kyle was there. I ran into him at the bar at C2E2. We started talking, and so it is kind of crazy. I mean, I met James back in 2012.
Wow.
Like we were hanging out at at the Hyatt and stuff, and it's like during a WonderCon, and so
Okay.
I've been able to meet like these people on the way, and it is nuts now to see where everything is. Like I met Ben Abernathy, who's the group editor for Batman. I met him in a bar during a Long Beach convention back in like the very first like Wizard World LA that was actually in Long Beach. I met him back then, and he was the editor at Wildstorm, and now he's the group editor for Batman. So it is interesting to see how we've all kind of like come up together and done all this stuff together. Even though Ben's been around for a bit, because he was Dark Horse's very first intern.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was their very first intern. So he's been around for a while. He's definitely done a lot of stuff. He has like a lot of experience. I guess why he has such a great perspective on our industry is because he was at Dark Horse, he was at Marvel, he was at Wildstorm, he was at DC. He was at Madefire for a little bit. He's definitely seen our industry from many different perspectives. And I think that's part of why he has the perspective he has. And I think that leads in some of the success of the Batman line right now.
Nathan has an interesting question. DC has announced a ton of Infinite Frontier miniseries, Shazam, Blue and Gold, Swamp Thing, etc. Has there been a shift at DC about the purpose or goal of the miniseries format for the line?
I think we just start. I personally like miniseries. Like, I don't know why miniseries suddenly became a weird thing, right? Like, I mean, back in the day, like there were miniseries all the time, and they were great. And you would have characters that not everybody should have an ongoing all the time. I think
100%.
I've asked this question before to people where I'm like, do you think your character only has value if they have an ongoing series, right? It's like your favorite character, I should say, right? And to me, it's all about just telling the best stories you possibly can with those characters. Right. And sometimes that means telling it a miniseries. Like, there's a lot of really, think about great miniseries that came out in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And then at some point, I feel like miniseries, that the title miniseries suddenly became a bad word at some point. And I don't know when that was. And I think now with this new era of DC and going into Infinite Frontier, I think that conversation started being like, why are we doing minis with these books? Because, there were times where books would not get approved because they were like, oh, it wouldn't last 2 years. And it's like, then okay, fine. Then just do a mini then. Do a 6-issue, do an 8-issue. Let's just try something different. And then if it's successful, you do, quote unquote, a second season for that book.
Right.
And that is the case. There's some books, there are books that are minis that people are already seeing how strong they're doing, and it's like, okay, cool, let's go, let's do more of it. So I don't think, I'm not sure the philosophy changed so much, but maybe they did look at it and start saying, why is it a bad word? Like, I'm a big fan of maxi series. I think that's something when you look at like something that Tom has done, right? Like Tom, kind of bringing back the maxi series, right? I think him come into 12 issues and stuff, and so now there are things. And me, like after doing 100 issues of the Flash, I don't think I'd ever do that again. Knock on wood. Who knows?
I'm glad, Josh, honestly, because I really think double shipping and 18 issues a year at Marvel has burnt out many good creators in terms of wanting to do work for the big two.
I will say this. I kind of miss double ship a little bit. Like, I do, and this is why, because there were times where, Flash was my full-time job, basically. And so I knew what I had to do, and it was kind of consistent. So there's days I miss it, kind of, but I recognize it's hard on everybody. I mean, it's a beast, dude, from every step of the way. Like you're saying, it burns you out. But a lot of the books I'm talking to DC about are, shorter runs or shorter books or shorter minis. There's some stuff I've been pitching recently, and I really like it. Like the fact that Infinite Frontier 6 issues, some of the stuff I'm talking about will be a 12 issue or an 8 issue here and there. And, things like Robin. I can't imagine being on Robin for like a very long time, even though I love that character and I have a plan for what I want to do with that character. It's like, after doing that, I can't imagine being on it for a very long time. But you look at the stuff, there's something really powerful. I mean, from a writer's perspective, I think doing ongoings are great. I think you can create characters that can tell those kinds of stories, right? Like, it's interesting about an ongoing series. With an ongoing series, you're not just creating a story, you have to create a character that you can then place in many different kinds of stories, right? Like, I think one of the best examples is Hellboy. Like, Hellboy is a character that you can kind of, like, infinite numbers of stories you can do with that character. Batman is obviously the same way. I think Batman is probably the most popular, greatest version of this. Is that you can use Batman as a vehicle for any kind of story you want to tell. That's why, particularly, there's probably more. I'm guessing this, but I think I'm right. There's probably more Elseworlds of Batman than right. Like
that makes sense. That's very likely.
Because
very
you can throw anything. You can throw Batman into anything, and I think so. When you were a writer coming onto a book and you're taking over this character, you kind of have to keep that in mind. Is this right? It almost becomes, and I might be wrong on this. I don't know, but it almost becomes more character based than story based, right? And your idea is like it can never end. Like everything is a second act. Like when I was on Flash, every arc ended with a cliffhanger, basically, right? It was always like the A, B, C plot, the D plot, E plot was going on forever. I was seeing stuff in issue 9, and I knew I wasn't going to pay off to 100. Like there was stuff going on that was crazy, and then you're telling all these character stories at the same time. However, when you're doing a mini, and you're like, this is it right here, beginning, middle, and end, there's something really awesome about that, and I think you can do a lot with that. And some of the best comics, like this is part of I think the divide from a lot of these things, is like some of the best comics, the comics we celebrate, the comics that go on forever as evergreens. You know what they all have in common? They have endings.
Yeah.
Real endings. And so that's why I think minis are awesome. Minis and maxis, I think, are great because if you can do an ending, man, I mean, it's tough. It's tough. Like, being able to get an ending, like that's sometimes I think the sign of a lot of the stories we love, like New Frontier, Dark Knight, all those things, they have endings.
Yeah, Watchmen.
Watchmen. Yeah, they all have endings. And so I think that's one of the things about a mini. Like look at Tom, going back to Tom, Vision has an ending. You look at Mr. Miracle, even Omega Men, like they have endings, and that's where I think there's power to that. So yeah.
I kind of disagree with Nathan, where he's like, my only gripe with miniseries are that they are often unimportant or throwaway in terms of larger effects on the line. I don't think every great story needs to affect the line. It's that simple. I don't think so. Sorry.
Interesting. I mean, I think it's really interesting when I think about the fandom and what they're kind of wanting. And
sure,
there's the desire for everything to count, right? Like everything has to be part of this.
Well, define what it has to count. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like sort of. I know. No, I know. What I'm saying is that's very literal. And again, like my great example would be Sword of the Atom that Gil Kane did back in the 80s. Was this incredible Ray Palmer story that had nothing to do with what the Justice League was doing or what Batman or Superman was doing, but it was a great Ray Palmer story. And no, it wouldn't have. They tried to sustain it. They brought it back a couple times. It wasn't as good as the first story. It's. I mean, it's.
I would say though, if I was ever going to write the Atom, I would 100% reference that story, because it's so good. It's good.
Cool.
It's cool. Well, I mean, like when you even read something. You read something like Dark Knight Strikes Again, and then the Atom was in there, and he was like fighting the stuff in the little petri dish.
Right.
But I think it's tough with that. Like, I understand what you're saying about what the person with the question was saying.
Yeah, Nathan. Yeah, no, and I get it too, Nathan. I'm not trying to pick on you, man.
And I think part of this is you want those characters to matter, right? I think that's really what you're talking about, is you want that character to matter, and you want their place in the DCU to matter.
Sure.
Sometimes those minis are so good, they force them to matter. Does that make sense? Like they will, like we were talking about Golden Age, man. Like Golden Age was this prestige format mini on the side. And even though it's an Elseworld, it impacted JSA, it impacted Starman, it impacted so much. I mean, it informed so much about that section of the DCU. And so you could look at the time and say, oh, it didn't matter when it was coming out. But over time, it massively matters.
Sure.
So I think with those minis, I do think with some of the conversations we're having, I think most of the minis that I'm aware of, that I know of talking with them, will impact the line, right?
Right. They're leading to bigger stories.
They're leading to bigger stories, or they're going to impact and collide, or that character will go from here to here. I mean, you look at something like Naomi, and it's like Naomi was an 8 issue, and then, she was in Young Justice, and now she's in Justice League. So it's like, it's tough to say they don't matter. I do understand what you're saying, and I think there is part of that in the past that like sometimes there be these throwaway minis. I don't I don't want to like bash anything. I guess it's only
No,
throwaway if he throws away, right? Like if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. Like, if you love it, you love it. I mean, that's like saying I'm sure there were people when Ultimate Spider-Man was starting that were like, whatever, that's on the side, that doesn't matter. And it's one of the best books of the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And obviously, it 100% matters right now.
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. Conversely, at the beginning of New 52, there were a bunch of one-shots that came out, and as they were explained to me, they literally were, okay, we're reworking Rose and Thorn and representing it, A, to maintain the trademark, but B, this is a potential pitch that if somebody wants to do Rose and Thorn as a movie or a cartoon or whatever, here's a one-shot story. We're moving on. And there was a Kid Eternity story like that, and a lot of these, again,
I remember that
C and D level heroes and stuff to kind of throw out there and stuff. And so I understand that feeling that, well, this doesn't matter. But I also think that the publishers are much wiser since then. And I don't think they greenlight us. I don't think they greenlight stories anymore that don't matter.
No, dude, no, it all matters. Yeah, it all matters. I mean, one thing I would say to you is that, with the mini thing is it's like, how do I word this? Yeah, it matters. Especially when those characters, like, in some instances, those minis are created to make sure that character has a story during something bigger, right? And you want them to be important, but you're also recognizing they don't need to have 20, 30 issues.
Right.
Important, make them matter. We do this, and then again, like Naomi's an example, there's a Shazam mini coming out, and that connects with Teen Titans Academy. It connects with other stuff we have planned, so it's like, yes, it's a 4-issue. I think it's 4 issues. It's a 4-issue mini.
I think you're right.
But that will connect with other things.
Understood. There you go. Josh, we almost went 2 hours. I feel like I'm keeping you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, Kenneth, I agree with you, Kenneth. It all matters, no matter what era of DC or Marvel you like and enjoy. Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember when, dude. I'm sure you remember this, but it's like when Brand New Day started, right? And people were like, "I'm gonna throw my whole Spider-Man collection away," and it was like, dude, like those stories still happened, And
right.
Then you look at New 52, right? Like New 52, it erased a lot of stuff. But it never, to me, like when New 52 happened, it never diminished the love I had of DC, right? Like, it never diminished all the books that I had loved before New 52, right? So I could still look at Infinite Crisis. I could still look at Starman, for example, right? I could still look at all these books from before, looking at Nightfall, Death of Superman, going back and reading old issues of Justice League. Like I was reading a bunch of old Bronze Age Justice League recently for reasons. Going back and doing research, right?
Oh, that's great. What writers were you reading?
Oh, I can't tell you. I'll give it away.
Okay, there you go. Shame on me. I understand.
But it's like I'm going back and I'm reading all these old books, but none of it ever diminished those things. And then now a lot of the stuff is important now, right? There's ways of doing it. Like look at Connor. There's a lot of Connor books that I love. Connor being gone didn't make me suddenly not like Connor, right? Like I suddenly wasn't like, oh man, whatever. Well, Connor's gone. I guess I don't love Connor anymore. It's like no, I still like that character a lot.
Well. Sure, your feeling stays strong with the characters. No, where and again, I'm saying this as a reader, not animosity, but frustration with the publisher is when they jettison. Like again, I love the idea that Lemire had when he had Frankenstein, and I can't even remember who else, but that they were the Golden Age characters that were fighting World War II. And it's like, yeah, the Justice League didn't exist, and it's like, okay.
Oh yeah, you definitely raise your eyebrow at times, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, all right.
Yeah,
I don't blame Lemire. I don't blame anyone that drew and I love DC's version of Frankenstein. I think he's a fantastic character. But that said, it's like it's a fucking Justice Society. What are you doing, man?
It's so crazy. Like, when it comes to New 52, it's it's interesting, right? Because I mean, you know why it happened. It's because in August, well, this is part of it, is August of 2010. If you go back and look at August 2010, not a single comic sold more than 100,000. Nothing. And that was the first time in a really long time. And, you know, I really shouldn't speak too much for people at DC at the time, but,
Sure.
you know, they basically were like, we got to do something. You got to mix it up, because if we stay on the train on, it's only going to get worse. You know, when you look at that, when you look at not a single book sold more than 100 that month, yeah, August 2010, that's something. That means there's a problem.
Right.
And you got to mix it up somehow. And, you know, New 52, as much as I think some people have problems with it, you cannot deny the sales of it. You know, and the sales of New 52 was crazy.
But it was selling because I think people were leaning more on the collectability market rather than, and there were some really good story ideas within the New 52.
Yes. Well, also DC, the marketing they put into that event was bonkers. Remember how much they were doing the road shows? They had people going to shops. Like they did so much to get people into the stores, you know, and I think that definitely changed a lot of stuff after that, because they were able to kind of, you know, get more people in the stores, basically. People can tell me I'm wrong, but that, you know, there was an image boom that came after that. There was a lot of cool Marvel stuff that came after that. New 52 played a role in that.
Agreed.
And again, like I was saying to you earlier, you know, and it's tough sometimes. I never really see myself as a destroyer, even though I have at times. But that's what it is in superhero books, particularly. You have destroyers and you have builders.
You have builders.
Jeff was always a builder, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, you know, he was always additive. He was always building. He rarely destroyed, right? Not say he never did. He did, but you know, he not as much as some other people did. But you know, like you can get great stories out of it. You can get great stories out of the fall of characters, the build up of characters.
Oh, sure.
These publishing decisions like New 52, and we all love Rebirth, and we got Rebirth because of New 52, right? And
well, that's true.
Like, I always think about this all the time, man, because I think about change in comics, and I think people get really, you know, worried about change. But it's like for me, when I came into DC, when I was a kid, like when I started reading as a kid, there was all kinds of change coming. Like, I mean, we had just gotten past, we were like 5 years after Crisis at this point, and here comes Bart, here comes Connor, here comes Cassie, you know, here comes Tim,
Kyle.
Franklin. You know, Kyle. Yeah, Kyle's a great example, right? We have Kyle because of what happened to Hal, right? We have Tim. Like I always think about this when I'm at a convention and we're talking about the conversation, and I'm like, raise your hand if you're a Tim Drake fan, you know, and everybody raises their hands, and I'm just like, Jason Todd died for you. Like,
that's right.
If those happened, we wouldn't have got that stuff.
That's absolutely right.
You know, sometimes it's tough, and I know I always tell people at conventions to get concerned. I can tell they're worried, and I know it's tough, but it's a roller coaster. You know, when you're on a roller coaster, you go up, you go down. It's scary, but you know once you recognize you're on that roller coaster, and you know the intent is to have fun, but there is going to be scary moments. I think that's how superhero books, particularly DC, has been for a while, where it's definitely a roller coaster ride. It's scary at times, but we'll get you there. We'll get you to the end of that ride.
That's so funny. I agree, Josh, and I use the carnival ride analogy as well, and that you gotta let the newbies get that initial shock of, oh my God, they just killed X, and they don't know or I refer to it as the rope trick. They don't know the rope trick yet. This is the first time they've seen the rope trick. Like, don't worry, that character you love might take a couple of years, but he'll be back, because there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that, because the emotion is still there. God, Hickman wrote when Hickman killed Johnny Storm in his Fantastic Four run, you had some really great emotional moments that John got to play with. I love when the Thing, out of frustration, needed to beat up the Hulk, Hercules, and Thor, and it ends with the Thing crying in the Hulk's chest, and they all get it. Like, they're all right there for him. Or with Spider-Man and Franklin on the rooftop, and Spider-Man tells Franklin, I lost a favorite uncle of mine. I know what you're going through. I mean, those are beautiful moments.
Yeah,
So
and then
we
look at
know.
when Johnny came back. Like when Johnny came back, and there's a whole thing where he comes to the, he's burning, he had the arm situation going on. Like when that happened, you're just like, hell yeah, like
Yes.
Johnny's arm, like,
Yep.
and that's how you get those moments, is by of doing stuff like that.
Absolutely.
I definitely think about this stuff all the time, of like those kinds of beats. And also, I mean, I think if we want new readers, right? And so if you're getting new readers, if you want new readers, you got to play a different game for those new readers, because if you've been reading comics as long as we have, you've seen it all, right?
Right.
It's hard to be surprised. It's hard to get something new. Everything kind of feels cliche to you, or it feels tropey because you've seen it, or you see them repeating it, or whatever. But somebody that's coming in, they don't know that, and we got to be able to play those same tricks.
Right.
Like, at some point in time, you were reading, let's say you've been reading comics for 20 years, right? That's just 20 years.
Okay.
You've been reading comics for 20 years, let's say this. You've seen a lot in that time. You've seen people die and come back, and sometimes there's emotional connections to those things. We cannot deny those same kinds of stories to the newer readers that are coming in. You gotta give it to them too,
Absolutely.
Like this, like I reading comics in the late 80s, right? And by then, there's a lot of stuff that's old news by then, right? Like I started reading comics, as a kid in the early 80s. But when I started going to Costco and Target and getting these big packs of comics, you're talking about late 80s. And then by the time you get down to the early 90s, that's when I was like riding my bike to the comic book store every single like Saturday morning to get my books. So for some people who've been around a little longer than me, there's a lot of stuff that to me was brand new. They were like, oh, that's old news. That's old news, But I was able to get those same experiences, I was able to get that same stuff, and we can't deny it.
Yeah.
Listen, I pay attention enough to know there are people who are very opinionated about comics, who started reading at New 52, who started reading at Rebirth, who started reading maybe 3 or 4 years ago, right? And it's all new to them. And they're going back and they're reading stuff, and they're getting their information, and they're gathering it up, they're going and reading it. But we got to be able to give them the same kind of stuff. We can't go, oh no, it's all old news now. It's like, you gotta feed them too,
Absolutely. No.
Act.
It is a balancing act. I completely agree with you. No. And again, man, I got a couple decades on you, and I remember again going back to the Bronze Age. That's when I started buying comics and stuff. And yeah, it's fine. It's good. It's good to get the new readers in, to scare them and shock them, and then make them worry about these characters, because it's going to make them come back. I remember for Death of Superman, and when the regular run ended before Reign of the Superman brought everything back, and Jonathan has this big heart attack at the end of issue, and Superman had been his funeral. It was post funeral for a friend, and so it was there. And I asked, and again, I'm an adult man. I'm in my 30s, and I asked, the dealer, the comic book dealer. I'm like, well, what's going to happen next? He's like, nothing. It's over. That's it. I'm like, fuck you, man. I'm like, I've seen the rope trick. Shut up. I'm like, just tell me maybe nothing was announced yet, and we don't know. But they're not going to leave the story there. Give me a goddamn break. But also, if you are too old to appreciate the carnival ride or the rope trick, you are absolutely within your right to say, I'm a grown man. I've seen this trick before. I'm out. That's fine.
Yeah. There's two things with that. One, I mean, talk about how great it was for DC at that time to say we're not going to have Superman books for 3 months. Like, to basically try to make it really look like it was over. Like, that is something, man, we've asked about that a couple times. Of like,
I bet.
Book, and they're like, no, we can't do that. But I think the time they did it, that was really great. But yeah, you're right, man. That's a really great way to say it, is if you go to a magic show, right? Can you imagine you go to a magic show and you've been to this magic show 3 times, right? And you've seen this trick. And by the 3rd time, you're like, I totally know how this trick works. I know it. And then you start heckling and start yelling, I know this trick. Everyone else in that audience, they don't know that trick. Like, they're seeing it for the first time. They might figure it out too. They might immediately be like, oh, I know. But that's part of the experience for them, is to figure out the trick. So it's like, let them experience that trick. Let them do it.
There are comic critics and podcasters who literally, I'm a grown ass man. I don't need to see that anywhere. And it's like, well, then it's time for you to leave the carnival ride. Then you are an adult, and the tilt-a-whirl is not as thrilling as it was when you were 7 years old. And that's totally legit, but time to move on.
Totally legit. And then you can find other stuff. There's a lot of comics out there.
Well, that's what I was going to say too. And I mean, I still like the rope trick. I'm very entertained by superhero stories. By the same token, as an adult reader, I am thrilled with the amount of creator-owned stuff and the different genres and stories that we're getting. And I am a firm believer that this is the second golden age of comics that has been going on for 20 plus years. And I'm not sick of it. I mean, that's why I've been doing Word Balloon for 16 years. And I'm not sick of discussing this stuff because it's all exciting to me.
Yeah, for sure. Like we were saying, like I've been, I mean, because I worked at a comic store in 1995, I basically have been working in comics in some form or another for 25 years, and I'm never sick of it. And I feel like right now it is really a great time. There's a lot of awesome books out right now from creator-owned, Marvel, DC, everybody. People are putting stuff online. You got Kickstarters, you got everything going on. People are making great books, and it is a very exciting time. What's this person here?
All right. Oh,
yeah.
Kenneth. No, I agree with Kenneth, but of course Mario knows I am beyond frustrated with current Star Trek. No, Mario,
you don't like Star Trek.
I don't like Discovery. I think it's bad writing. I think Picard was a missed opportunity. Mario, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I am always optimistic that the next episode of Star Trek, maybe I'll like it a little bit better. And
the only Star Trek show I didn't like. Listen, the only Star Trek show I didn't like was Enterprise, and I didn't take it personal. I'll tell you, the moment that song came on, the moment that song came on, I was out. I remember because I'd gone to visit my mom. I went to visit my mom, and my mom is a huge Star Trek fan, and so she used to take me to like Star Trek convention when I was a kid. And so when that first episode of Enterprise was on, I was like, "Oh, it's tonight? All right, let's watch it." And I was visiting her, and the moment that song came on, I was like, "I gotta hit the road. I'll see you later."
I understand. Did your mom like Enterprise or no?
Oh, I don't remember. I don't think so.
Okay.
I think she just liked the show, and it was like but yeah.
And it's funny. Teeny and I briefly.
You know what? I'll give you a great example. I was thinking about this last night. Right? I have an on and off again relationship with wrestling.
Okay.
Right?
Oh God. I saw Sunday. Go on.
Okay, so I didn't watch on Sunday. I know what happened, but this is my point. I started watching when I was a kid.
Sure.
Right? I didn't watch it for probably about 6 years. And then I started watching it in 1999. The very first episode that I saw for that whole break was the night that Jericho showed up in the WWE. He showed up and made his whole thing, the countdown. Sure. And I remember I was at a friend's house and they were trying to explain wrestling to me, and they're like, Vince McMahon owns it. And I'm like, no, he doesn't. That's just a character, But then I got hardcore into wrestling. And then I went to college and I was hardcore in wrestling in college. Everyone in the dorm, we were all into wrestling, going to events. I had this, I was very much into wrestling. I used to go to events all the time. I used to go to WWE events, and then I started going to local events in California. I was going to PGW, so I had this relationship, and I would fall in and out. Every once in a while I wouldn't watch for a while, and then I was watching for a bit again until it got to a point where I wasn't watching Raw anymore. I wasn't watching SmackDown anymore. I was watching NXT. I was doing a little bit here and there, and then but here's the thing: I would watch the pay-per-views, right? Especially once it was on the app, once it was on the network. I was watching it every month, and then I went from watching it every month to watching just Royal Rumble, SummerSlam, if King of the Ring was around, but then it became just Royal Rumble and WrestleMania. And this year I watched Royal Rumble, but I didn't watch WrestleMania, and I don't know if I necessarily have an interest in it right now. I don't watch it, however. I am very aware of what's happening. You know what I mean? It's weird. I know there were zombies on Sunday night in the ring. So I am aware. I know who's. I think Bobby Lashley's champion, right? So I'm pretty aware of what's going on with it. But I don't watch it right now, and it's not for me right now. It just isn't. Either I've aged out of it, or it's not holding my interest right now. Right? I think every year I'll always watch Royal Rumble for whatever reason. That's the one I might stick to. but I just don't watch it on the regular. It just isn't for me right now. However, I recognize it is for other people. Like, I was never a huge John Cena fan.
Okay.
Right? Never a huge John Cena fan, but obviously he was popular with people. I mean, he had the highest selling T-shirts. Same thing with Roman Reigns. Like, I'm glad Roman Reigns is a bad guy right now. Like, that's great. He was selling T-shirts like crazy. Even though I would have, listen, John Cena's funny. So John Cena was training in California when I was in California.
Okay.
Before he became like John Cena we have now. And I was at the event that he had his very first dark match at. And I knew who he was because of knowing wrestling when he was Prototype. And he came out with this like Terminator gimmick. And I cheered John Cena like crazy. Like, I cheered John Cena because I was just like, yes, the new guy, local guy. Yes, John Cena. After that, every time I've ever seen John Cena, I've booed him like crazy. Like, I have booed him every SmackDown I went to, every event I've ever gone to. I have booed John Cena at all of them because it's part of the fun. I feel like is to boo John Cena.
Sure, of course. No, I get it.
I was at WrestleMania when he won. I was there at WrestleMania when he won the title for the first time. That WrestleMania ended with Batista giving Triple H a powerbomb. I was there at that WrestleMania. It was awesome because Shawn Michaels fought Kurt Angle at that WrestleMania.
I like Shawn Michaels, yeah.
Yeah, so I've booed John Cena the whole time. However, I booed John Cena the whole time, I recognize he was incredibly popular the entire time, right? Like, I'm mature enough to recognize that he obviously, and then now I was thinking about this the other day of like, I booed John Cena this entire time. I am so crazy excited for Peacemaker. I am super pumped for him in Suicide Squad. Like, all of this stuff. It's like, I don't know if I should say this. I know people who have seen Suicide Squad and they loved it. So it's great. Like, I think that, but with this stuff with wrestling right now, it's not for me. And that's okay. Like, there are other people. Don't get me wrong. I think zombies are not the best idea to have in the ring.
Honestly, Josh, to me, that's the exception because I love how intricate the drama and the storylines have become. I think that's great. To throw zombies in there now, it's like Santa Claus may as well have just showed up. It's like, hey, man, it blows the reality that you've established that these guys really hate each other and whatever. And it's like, again, I've seen the rope trick. I understand it. But to add zombies as an element, it just got stupid. And that has nothing to do with the drama that they are displaying. And to hear that the Miz got injured, it's like, well, you're fucking around.
That sucks because he like never gets injured, right? Like, that dude has not really been injured this whole time. To get injured in a zombie match, that sucks.
That's what I mean.
It's like RoboCop. Remember when they put RoboCop in WCW? I just watched that. I watched a video. I've been watching a lot of. This is part of it. This is what's kind of funny about my perspective on some of this stuff, and I kind of laugh at myself a little bit. But I've actually been watching a lot of documentaries about wrestling.
Me too. They've been amazing.
Yeah, because you have Dark Side of the Ring.
Yes. Stuff, and the one about collecting all the memorabilia for the museum.
Yes. Yeah. And there was the Stone Cold one that was on A&E a few weeks back. I watched that one. But there's also people who make obviously these like videos about wrestling on YouTube, and they make like the history of Hulk Hogan. And not just the history of Hulk Hogan, but they're like, here's the history of Hulk Hogan in 1994. So I'm like, I'll watch that. And one of those videos was about the RoboCop thing, and I watched that last week. And I was not watching wrestling when that happened.
I wasn't either. I totally forgot about that. Go on.
I'm aware of it, but there's all kinds of stuff like that. Remember David Arquette? Was champion, WWE champion.
Yeah. Well, or even Stephen Amell showing up and playing around and stuff.
Yeah. See, that's what's funny about that is that added up later because now he has that show. So it's like, I mean, I think I think he's a smart man. I think he knows what he's doing. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think about that stuff of sometimes these things are not for me in wrestling, but I'm still pretty tied into it. I still watch it. I still don't watch it, but I'm like I said, I don't really watch it right now, but I know what's going on. And I think there's a lot of people. It's interesting. I think there are a lot of people in comics that are exactly the same way. There are a lot of people in comics who aren't reading the book, but they know everything that's going on. They know all the books. They know it all. And I was thinking about this a bit. I think when we were dealing with Infinite Frontier, like the lead into it and the lead out of the Zero issue, we see a lot of commentary, and it was all around articles about the book, but not the actual book. And I'm kind of like, well, read the book. Don't read the article, read the book. But then I was laughing at myself because I wasn't like again, I have not seen the zombies. I've seen a picture of them. I have not watched the match, but I remember when saw people talking on Twitter, and I'm glad that some people loved it. I know there are people that loved it. They thought it was fun. It's just superhero, silly wrestling stuff. That's great. For me, I was not a fan of zombies showing up. But again, that doesn't mean that I'm suddenly going to be like, I hate everything they're doing.
Oh, no, I agree. It was just a bad idea. To me, it was a bad idea. Well, they even, that during COVID, instead of having live
they had the screens.
Spectators, they had all the screens. And all of a sudden, a couple times, the screens would go from spectators to all zombies watching. And it's just like, yeah, we get it. And we know Army of the Dead is a sponsor of your event, Vince.
Oh, man.
Maybe not a good idea. That's all. Maybe you could do a zombie versus zombie match. Maybe.
What I'm going to say to you, though, is that, this is not a new thing.
No. Oh, good Lord.
We were talking about RoboCop and, think about the late 80s where it was there was so much wacky stuff.
Josh.
What was it? The gobbledygook or whatever?
I'm sorry?
The gobbledygook. Remember? The whole thing with the egg, and there was a turkey. There was a guy in a turkey costume one time who fought. Come on.
Well.
Actually, remember this. ECW for a while. ECW got moved to the Sci-Fi Channel, and all of a sudden they're like, we gotta have zombies. It wasn't zombie, it was vampires.
I wasn't watching, but I was aware of that. You're right. Well, even a worse example, and good Lord, Muhammad Ali would show up at wrestling matches all the time and mess with Andre the Giant and Gorilla Monsoon and all the old guys when they were still wrestling. And of course, very infamously, he fought Antonio Ioki, who was this Japanese wrestler who crab-legged the entire match and kept kicking Ali's legs, and kind of like The Miz, really fucked up Ali's legs. And his trainers and Angelo Dundee for years, his manager, are like, dumbest fucking thing Ali ever did. It really hurt his legs and his ability to move around the ring. He was constantly having leg issues after that stupid match. So, you're right. It's nothing new.
Yeah, well, wrestlers, they also love to do shit like that. If you...
Oh, yeah.
If they get an opportunity, but you're the flip side of that, because you had, what was it, Daniel Puder when he got in the ring with Kurt Angle, and Kurt Angle was like, let's do this. Daniel Puder, seriously put him in a real lock, and Kurt Angle's lucky that he got out of that and didn't get, and they cut that stuff out, but it's I think they cut it out. I think, that's stuff you can find.
You're right.
But it's
no, you're right.
Yeah, but this stuff's been going on for so long, but that's what goes our whole argument. It's nothing we're talking about is new.
No,
is new.
Absolutely.
And that's okay.
It is okay.
It is okay. Yeah, it's totally okay.
Well, that's right. In general, I'll accept it. Bad idea. They'll all forget about it in a couple or it'll be Rob Lowe singing the Snow White on the Oscars, and it'll be remember that time, and it won't matter because thank God there have been subsequent Oscar broadcasts that we like much better. So I get it.
Well, what will happen is eventually somebody will. It's one of those things where someone like The Rock, maybe not The Rock, will come back and then he'll make fun of somebody for zombies, right?
That's true.
It's if The Miz is out there at WrestleMania when you're messing around and then all of a sudden The Rock's music hits and he comes down and he starts clowning The Miz for getting hurt by a zombie,
everyone will scream. That's true.
Yeah, everyone will laugh because this is also part of that, right? This is where
that's a very good point. It's a very good point
about wrestling and comic books, and look at Star Wars, right? So. Okay, so I'm gonna go into this, and we should probably end after this. But
by all means, no, it's all right, Josh. Please continue.
All right, so this is a thought I've had recently.
Go on.
Hayden Christensen was, obviously played Anakin, Attack of the Clones, and then Revenge of the Sith, right?
Right.
And a lot of people did not like his performance, and I recently watched Attack of the Clones, and I was like, man, this guy's actually great because you 100% believe this dude's gonna be a serial killer. He is 100% going to kill the young man in the movie. Like if you keep that in mind, when you watch that movie, like look back at it and rewatch it now, you're like, that dude is 100% going to be a serial killer. Like he's going to become Darth Vader. It's all here. The pieces are here.
Yes,
but here's
master.
the thing. Yeah,
go on.
But here's the thing about that, right? Everybody was like, oh, that guy's not great in this role. It's, they definitely kind of crapped on it 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
The moment they announced that dude was going to be in that Obi-Wan show, people were fucking so excited because there is something that we love about continuity.
Yes.
When stuff comes back and we love it gets referenced. And even though people were against the Hayden Christensen stuff and had issues with him, the moment it was announced that he was coming back, dude, I saw when I saw like Rise of Skywalker in the theater, there's that scene at the ending where she's hearing all the voices, and one of the voices she hears is Hayden Christensen. I was in the theater and I was like, yes, like,
oh, that's cool.
That's cool. And so I feel like you love when that stuff comes back around. You love when it's referenced. You look at something like Fast and the Furious, and it's like that franchise. If they once they got like to 4 and 5, if they reference something from 1, 2, or particularly 3, the moments they like reference something from Tokyo Drift, and you're just like, hell yeah, like that stuff. You become so attached to even the thing that you kind of dislike. The fact that somebody else remembered it and uses it, you're just like, that's the coolest thing ever. And so like at some point, The Rock is gonna come out and he's gonna make fun of the zombies, and we're all gonna fucking cheer. So
James Bond.
But yeah,
you're right.
I should let you go.
All right. I'll leave my thought.
Let me hear your thought. No, let me hear it.
I was going to say, and again, I'm now echoing again. James Bond. When For Your Eyes Only, when it was Roger Moore, in the pre-credit sequence, he's at Tracy Bond's grave, who was Bond's wife in Diamonds Are Forever, with Honor Majesty's Secret Service with George Lazenby, and it was a callback, and it was that no, this is one man, and he did marry, like it wasn't some other guy. It was James Bond did get married, and they were acknowledging that. And my other argument is with Star Trek Discovery, and all of a sudden Spock has an adopted sister. I'm like, okay, you really want to do that? I want a dinner scene, and I'm totally serious, a flashback of Michael Burnham, Spock, and Sybok. And you really want to impress me? Make Sybok matter. And wouldn't that be an interesting dinner conversation between those 3 characters?
Man, when Star Trek Into Darkness was coming out, and it was real obvious, that he was going to be, Khan.
Yes.
I was hoping he wasn't going to be Khan. I was hoping he was going to be either 2 people. I wanted him to either be Sybok, because then it would have mattered. And I think Sybok, Star Trek 5 gets kind of a bum rap. I think it's a really interesting movie, and I think
I
Sybok
totally agree.
Character. I wish that movie had the money to hit what it wanted to hit, right? Like getting the money taken away and losing a lot of stuff. I think it impacted that movie. You can see it, but I wanted to be Sybok. The other character I wanted to be, since you're a Star Trek fan, the other character, I remember when they had that scene and they're standing there and he's on the other side of the glass and Spock's here and he's there. I want him to say, my name is Lore. Because if it had been that he had been Lore and it had been this whole thing of like, instead of it making it Khan and that super soldier thing, if it had been Lore, and this is what was going on with Lore before he had gone on, and gotten trapped, all this stuff. If it had been Lore and it was all these androids they were fighting, all stuff like that, I would have lost my mind in the theater. If he was
No, that's a good idea.
So, if you reference stuff, again, another great reference is in Last Crusade, where they're in the tunnel at the bottom. And he's like, oh, that's the Ark of the Covenant, and she's like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. It's like that small little thing, it's a small little thing, but if you know it, you know it. But I love that stuff. Even those are all great examples, though. I mean, obviously, Raiders and Last Ark, Raiders Last Ark and Last Crusade are terrific movies. But yeah, even the stuff that you're like, nobody cares about but you kind of thing, right? Because that's the thing about all this stuff. As much as, like, this is going to sound crazy, maybe. There is some person, a kid, adult, whatever, that loved the zombies.
I have no doubt.
And they're like 10 years from now, they're gonna be like, man, remember when the zombies showed up? I'm a wrestling fan because zombies showed up. And there are books that people, don't, that maybe aren't remembered really well, but somebody out there, that was their first comic or a comic that made them fall in love with it. I remember one time I was doing a thing in New York. I was doing a comic book live show. You know the comic book live guys?
Oh yeah, I love those guys. Absolutely.
So I actually went to one live. I was the guest in person, and it was me and Josh Fialkov.
Oh, that's great.
So the two of us, we went together and we're at the show, and I started started bashing a book I had worked on that I wasn't happy with during the show.
Uh-oh.
And I remember being like, I wasn't happy working on this book, I'm not happy with it. Let's leave it at that. And so I kind of started talking about why I was unhappy with it. This is a long time ago. This is like almost 10 years ago. And I basically was like, I had worked on this book and I wasn't happy on the book. And, I don't think it's a good book is basically what I was saying. The moment we were done recording, this guy walks up and he has every copy of it. And he wants me to sign it because he loves it. And I'm like, oh my God, I just like bashed this book in front of this guy. And I was like, that obviously was a mistake on my part. Like I learned a lesson in that moment. But that's what stuff we talk about a lot of these things is that like, I reference stuff that I'm sure I reference all kinds of stuff in the past of DC. And I'm sure there's stuff that I love from the past of DC. Oh, I'll give you an example. A book that I love that DC did that everybody hated, I did not know everyone hated it until I got older, was Bloodlines.
Like I hated Bloodlines. That's hilarious.
Hey man, you know what? We got Hitman because of Bloodlines. All right,
you're right about that. That is the one good thing that came out of Bloodlines. You're right.
I loved Bloodlines, and a lot of people did not. And so
you are right.
I think the only other person who loved Bloodlines was Steve Orlando. So when Steve Orlando referenced it in his JLA run, I was so happy.
That's fantastic.
He brought one of those characters in to that story, and so. I haven't really referenced it at times. I mean, there's been times I've had like Noonan's Bar, like in an issue, like I've referenced that idea, and things like that. So I definitely, that's referencing Hitman. That's not really referencing, Bloodlines. But see, I like Bloodlines. I bought all of it, dude. I bought every Bloodlines annual. I bought them, and
I get it.
I was a kid, so I didn't know that everybody hated it. It took a long time for me to realize everybody hated Bloodlines, but. It's one of those things. It's like it's kind of part of my fandom as a kid was getting to read this thing that all these characters got introduced because of it. I thought it was cool. Big aliens coming.
For me, it was the original Super Sons and World's Finest, and everybody hated Batman Jr. and Superman Jr. And I was like, "This is a lot of fun. I loved it."
Yeah.
So I get it, buddy. All right, I've kept you long enough.
Yeah.
But great seeing you and great talking to you. And let's catch up in the summer. When Infinite Frontier starts coming out, and good luck with the Robin stuff as well. It sounds hilarious, and it's always good to talk to you, Josh. I'm really happy that you're one of the big architects right now at DC, and I'm enjoying what you guys are doing, and that goes for James and everybody else. And so glad the influx of the new people like Ram V and Stephanie and people like that. It's all delightful. So congrats.
Thank you so much. It means a lot, man. Thank you.
It's absolutely Josh Williamson, everybody. Thanks for watching. Tomorrow, Chris Cantwell's going to be on at this. Actually, is he going to be earlier? But he is going to be.
Tell him that I loved. He knows this. I've already told him this, but I loved his Doctor Doom book. That book was great.
Oh my God, it's amazing, and I love what he's doing on Iron Man too. But you're right, that Doom series
was so good.
And then I didn't until last summer. When we did a big jam conversation, John Con. I hated that it was called John Con.
You didn't know he did *Halt and Catch Fire*? Is that what you're going to say?
Exactly. And God, Shelley's just like raving about *Halt and Catch Fire*. And I'm like, yeah, I've been meaning to watch that.
It's great.
But I'm like, oh my God, what a great show. So yeah. So that'll be fun. That's tomorrow. And To the Outer Limits, of course, we'll be discussing Wolf 359, not to confuse it with the Great Next Generation Encounter with the Borg. But so that's Thursday on Word Balloon Live.